Gene, it is the dream of a lifetime, Daddy. Oh. And you know something? I can't imagine this is like going to the mountaintop 1,000 times over. I feel the energy. Hulkamania's running worldwide, and it just turns me on, me, Gene. And I felt every one of those 25, 30 plus thousand people with me standing behind me all the way, and it felt great.
Well, you have arrived, Hulk Hogan.
Have you never seen anything as beautiful as this, me, Gene? This belt is part yours, too. It's everybody out there.
Like Andre the Giant, congratulating the new heavyweight champion of the world.
I swear, man, this is the end of an era. Oh, that's the end of an era. That brings back so many memories. Hulk Hogan is dead. Hulk Hogan is no more. His head is at the ground. His heart has stopped. His lungs have stopped breathing. He is no longer part of this reality frame to which we exist in. All of us, the cutest baby, the cutest puppy will all drop dead someday. It is part of life. It is what it is, what it is. Freaking out about it, caring about it, doesn't really matter. It is inexorable. It will happen. And even to somebody as powerful as Hulk Hogan. I don't know how people do wrestling today, but I know back then I was one of those people that was a Hulk Hogan fan. It's different. It's so different today. Like you could never get away with what they got away with back then. And what I mean by that is in multiple ways, but in one singular way, is at the time that Hulk Hogan was fighting and wrestling, people didn't exactly know that it was fake. So all of the storylines, all of those things, people would watch it and you would watch it with a certain amount of wonder. Hulk Hogan would come out. I've seen Hulk Hogan get beat, like severely beat by multiple people, get dragged out in a stretcher and get into the back and get up limping and run back into the ring. He was that guy. That, what you just saw, where he's like, all of my Hulkamaniacs were with me. I felt every last one of them, Gene. I felt every last one of them. That was him. That was his motif. That was like the way he functioned. He was the level of energy that he used to put out in those matches. And here's another one. Well, wait, I don't even know if I can show this. Okay, I'm going to go with the first one because they're probably going to demonetize this video right off the bat. But end of an era. End of an era. Hulk Hogan is dead. And whatever he became as a right-wing figure and everything else, put all that to the side. His craft and his ability to do that, I've never seen anything like it. And I know this may be me saying stuff like Michael Jordan was the greatest player who ever lived. He was. And I know new players say, hey, but LeBron James, I'm sorry, I've lived through both. Michael Jordan was the greatest player that ever lived. Hulk Hogan is the greatest wrestler to ever do what he did. So it is a sad day to see Hulk Hogan go. He died last week. I didn't get the opportunity to play the clip last week, but I'll do it now. It's acting. Yes, I get it. It's acting, but Jesus Christ. I mean, there's physicality to it. There's a reason why many of those wrestlers commit suicide or many of those wrestlers get injured. They are doing this kind of physical sport. When a man gets on the top rope and jumps off the top rope and lands on a person, is that acting? Can you act falling at what, 9.8 meters per second squared onto another human body? Can you do that? Is there any way to do that? That's like Michael J. Fox. When Michael J. Fox got epilepsy, that was epilepsy. It was whatever the name of that disease is. And they say, hey, can you just act like you don't have that disease? And Michael J. Fox was like, are you out of your mind? Like, how do you do that, right? So it is a sad day to see Hulk Hogan, I don't know what you call it, take his last breath. A sad day. It's a very sad day. At least for me, it's the end of an era. It's what you got accustomed to, what you grew up with as a child. And to have that thing ripped away from you, as everything will be ripped away at some point, right? One thing before I get to my guest, Jerry, you're here a little early. Stay with me. Trump has just murdered the European Union. They have capitulated. Trump has just gotten a trade deal with the European Union that is one of the most humiliating vassal tributes that I've ever seen in modernity. If we were talking about the Napoleonic era, where a country would say, here's a bunch of money, here's a bunch of gold, leave us alone, and we will show fealty and allegiance to you. Okay, fair enough. That makes sense. I get that. Because that is the Napoleonic era. That is what you did. If this was, 20 BC, where you had tribes, and you had the big tribe, and the little tribe says, hey, we're giving you money, leave us alone. Okay, again, I get that. That makes sense. But what the European Union has just done is just introduce or reintroduce vassal tributes, in this case, to daddy. It is amazing, utterly amazing. I'm going to let Trump tell you himself as Ursula von der Leyen sits there in this weird, humiliating seat as Donald Trump goes on about windmills and how windmills suck and how Europe is windmills and windmills shouldn't be there, and about elements of the trade deal. And I'm going to tell you elements of this trade deal. And I'm going to let you yourself come to your own conclusions about whether or not Trump has just defeated Europe. And when I say he killed Europe, I'm saying that in the context that anything gets done requires energy. And it requires a low cost of that energy for you to have your factories, to have your companies, to have your businesses. If you're getting baby formula delivered, it takes a truck to deliver it, which runs on energy. It takes a plant to make it, which runs on energy. And it takes a certain cost for you to have those things so you can sell to the people at a particular price point that makes a business viable. The reason I'm saying he killed Europe is because Europe functioned purely and entirely, the garden, as they call it, on cheap Russian energy. And now Europe is going to be paying a hell of a lot more for that energy. And from my point of view, what you call the garden and what you consider to be Europe, Trump has just killed. This is Trump sitting with Ursula von der Leyen, vassal, humiliated, conquered, giving details of the deal that he has just made. It's just amazing to watch this. Okay, and now you're going to do that. Let's try this one more time.
Is going to agree to purchase from the United States $750 billion worth of energy, $750 billion worth of energy. They are going to agree to invest into the United States $600 billion more than they're investing already. So they're investing a large amount of money. You know what that amount of money is. It's very substantial, but they're going to invest an additional $600 billion. They're agreeing to open up their countries to trade at zero tariff. So that's a very big factor. Opening up their countries, all of the countries will be opened up to trade with the United States at zero tariff. And they're agreeing to purchase a vast amount of military equipment. We don't know what that number is, but it's the good news is we make the best military equipment in the world. So sort of you have to do that. I mean, until somebody tops us, which is not going to happen. We're way ahead of every other country in terms of the quality of the military equipment. You saw that recently in Iran. And
no, we didn't see that recently in Iran. We did not. We decisively did not see that recently in Iran. Iranian missiles was, again, UK, France, Britain, the Quisling Gulf states, all of those places were doing everything in their power to protect Israel. And the United States equipment, as he calls it, that's the best in the world. Those missiles were going through it like butter. And to give you one point of that before I get to the deal itself, the base, what is it? Al Adud base, the one that's in Qatar, the largest military base that the U.S. has in that region. Think of what happened. Iran told the United States exactly where they were going to hit. We're going to hit this base. We're going to hit it at this time. The U.S. put all of their missile systems and everything else to attack that stuff and try to knock that stuff out the sky, and Iran still hit their target. Israel wouldn't look like Israel looks today if those military equipment or that military equipment was as proficient as Donald Trump is claiming it was. But that to the side for the moment. This is a complete and utter capitulation and humiliation of Europe. This deal is astonishing. Donald Trump gets 0% tariffs on anything going into Europe, 15% tariffs on anything coming into the United States. So anything that Europe sends to the US gets a 15% markup. It damages the businesses and companies because now when you go and buy a product, that European product is going to be more compared to the American product. Now you still may say, I prefer the European product. Okay, fair enough. But I'm saying from the standpoint of shoppers' logic, where you're looking for the best cost, the best product, etc., two equal products, you buy the one that's cheaper. He's damaging those companies. Yes, the American consumer is going to pay more, but he's damaging those companies in Europe. EU is going to purchase an estimate of $100 billion in US weapons, $750 billion in energy, meaning LNG, and an investment of $600 billion. What does Europe get? Nothing. Europe gets nothing. Ursula von der Leyen needs to explain this. And so she has been out there trying to explain how on earth did they, quote unquote, negotiate a deal that is this humiliating and this one-sided. Here she is.
We will replace Russian gas and oil. We will also increase our energy cooperation. Purchases of US energy products will diversify our sources of supply and contribute to Europe's energy security. We will replace Russian gas and oil by significant purchases of US LNG oil and nuclear fuels.
Now, let's be clear. They're spending like 5 times more on US energy as compared to the energy they were getting out of Russia. Here's her, again, almost like an apology explanation of why they capitulated to a deal like this.
So I think we should not forget where we would have been on the 1st of August. We would have been at 30%. And it would have been much more difficult to get down now to the 15%. 15% is certainly a challenge for some, but we should not forget it keeps us the access to the American market. And what we are also doing intensively is diversifying to other regions of the world.
God, that's humiliating. That's humiliating. She's sitting there trying to explain to the Europeans why we'd accept a deal like this and acknowledging in that explanation it is a challenge. Okay, challenge is a heavy word. That word is carrying a heavy burden. That means the destruction and elimination of various European companies and businesses that can't function at that level. That's what it means. She understands that this is going to be, let's say, a headwind, to put it mildly, for some of the companies coming out of Europe. The idea that you are giving complete access to the American market, but you are taking a 15% tariff is amazing. The idea that you're agreeing to buy 750 billion euros or dollars in energy products from the United States when you had cheap Russian fuel that was reliable, that is still available to you, is amazing. You're accepting an elimination of various European companies and businesses when it didn't have to be that way. Let me go to my guess. Because I can go further into this. The reality of it is, this war that has been taking place has allowed a complete fleeing of money coming out of Europe into the US from the standpoint of weapons and energy. And this has now just gotten that much worse for the European Union. Ursula von der Leyen, humiliating, complete and utter humiliation. I want to go to my guests. I am joined with Jerry Gray. Jerry Gray, I think I described him as he was born in Australia, even though he spent time in the UK.
Other way around. Born in the UK, lived in Australia.
You were born in the UK? Okay, so I did get that right. Okay, I had that right the first time. For some reason, I thought you corrected me on that last time I said that. Okay, born in the UK, lived in Australia. He is now living in China, loving it in China. And he has been a fantastic, let's say, voice to try to correct some of the propaganda that is coming out of the West about China. And you do a damn good job of it, Jerry. The people loved your last time here. They come back for you back, all sorts of messages saying, bring Jerry back, bring Jerry back.
I enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank you.
No, man, I appreciate it. You have been on a tour.
Yes.
I think you typically do bike rides all across China.
Yeah.
Can you tell where you were this time around, or is it?
The last bike ride finished a month ago in Inner Mongolia. I rode from very close. I live very close to the border of Macau. If anyone knows the geography, I'm down in the south of China, and I finished 3,600 kilometers later, and I think it was 44 days up in the border of Mongolia.
Wow, that is impressive.
Just for fun.
That is impressive, man. Wow. Okay, fair enough. That is an impressive trip.
The thing is, Jamal, you cannot say that you know China if you live in Shanghai or Shenzhen or Beijing. And I don't live in any of those cities. I live in a much smaller city called Zhongshan. And it's in the Greater Bay Area, which is very, very well developed. But I get out of it as much as I can. Just last week, I was in Yichang, where the Three Gorges Dam is, a place called Jingzhou, which is where they have a medieval fort and a walled city, one of the finest walled cities left in the world, more than 1,000 years old. I travel around to these places, have a look, make some videos, record some things, and I'm starting a different channel in the future, which is just I'm gathering materials together for it now to do basically a travel channel, as opposed to what I do now, which is more I wouldn't describe myself as geopolitics. I'm more an observer of China and China's place in the world, and trying to just correct those errors that the Western world have on China. Because I mentioned this last time, almost everything that you hear about China, probably everything you hear about China in Western media is wrong. And it's wrong. Some of it is just misinterpretation, misunderstandings. Some of it is quite deliberate, but it's wrong.
Yeah, I was about to say quotes around misinterpretations.
Yeah, China's been collapsing since 1995, according to The Economist, since 2003, according to the great Gordon Chang, and we've got Peter Zien, and I mean these guys are experts in their field, but they just keep getting China wrong.
Yeah,
why? They don't understand China.
I was talking about the trade deal that Donald Trump worked out with Ursula von der Leyen. Well, let's call it a deal. I mean, Europe got steamrolled. But the European Union was also in China recently, where they were supposedly talking about some kind of deal themselves.
Yeah, literally a day apart. I'm surprised. Maybe this is the reason they got von der Leyen at a weak moment when she was jet lagged. They were literally a day apart. She was here a few days ago, and she was in Scotland yesterday. I don't see it the same way as you did.
Please, give me your take.
I see this as a kicking the can down the road. I had a chat with a guy called Warwick Powell this morning, Professor Warwick Powell, and I don't know if you know Warwick.
I do.
He's half Chinese, and he grew up in Macau, and during the Cultural Revolution, he was in and out of China. He understands, he speaks, reads, and writes Chinese. He is basically a Chinese person in a Western environment, and he really does understand what this is all about. And one of the things that he pointed out, and I agree with him entirely, the liquefied natural gas. Europe cannot buy the amount of gas that $750 billion will provide over 3 years because there are not enough ships to carry it. If you think about how much gas this is and how many liquefied natural gas carriers there are, and the only place in the world building LNG carriers is here in China. Yeah. So they're not going to be buying LNG carriers to do this because it defeats the whole purpose. They're trying to keep China down, and the only way to keep China down is to buy things from them. It's not going to work. So it is, and they don't have the carriers, they don't have the ports, They don't have the docking principles. My father was a master mariner in oil tankers, and I remember going to visit him on ships sometimes, and he had a 2 or 3 day layover off the Isle of Grain in London. Now, I'd come from the north of England down to the Isle of Grain and sit on a ship for 3 days waiting for its place. You cannot have this kind of backlog going on with these ships. It will take weeks to unload. You carry a load of liquefied natural gas, and you've got to wait for every other ship that's carrying it across. They don't have the port facilities for it. So they're going to have to build port facilities. They're going to have to build ships. They're not going to get $750 million. It's as simple as that. So what they've done is they've said to Donald Trump, yeah, okay, we'll give you the win. We'll give you it so your support base can say, wow, look how great Donald Trump is. It's pure theatrics. It's pure performance, that part of it. Now, the military investments, the European Union has said that they will buy 5%. Where are they going to buy it from? There's Rafael and Naval, and there's the British engineering, BEA, British Enterprises. There's a few in Europe, but basically the only place you can buy weapons is from America now. Right, the major place to buy weapons. So they are going to buy a lot because they have committed already. So this wasn't something new. So this was just a rehash of an old. They're always doing this. When Joe Biden said we're going to do this thing, Build Back Better World, B3W, and then he said 1 year later, these are all the things that we've done. Every single one of them was an old project that had just been put under this umbrella of Build Back a Better World. And it wasn't real. So they're doing this. It's theatrics. It's all theatrics. And I think what Ursula has done is probably quite a good thing, actually, because she can't control what France, Germany, Spain had just about walked away. I don't know if you saw the president of Spain walk away from the group at NATO. Now, he's not going to be part of this. So she doesn't have the unity that she needs. The United Kingdom are not even in Europe. They will buy stuff because they're a vassal of the UK. But Australia too, but they're not in Europe either. So I don't see this as a huge capitulation in the way that you do. I understand it looks like that on paper, but I just see it very differently. I think Ursula has probably looked at this deal and said, well, we can't do this, but it doesn't hurt to say that we can, or we will. And there's no penalty clause on this. We're going to buy $750 billion worth of LNG. Okay, great. What happens if we don't? Nothing, don't worry about it. So let's see in 3 years' time how much LNG has been sold, but it won't be anything. It'll slide away from the media, and no one will care. It'll just be yesterday's news.
I do understand your point. I totally understand your point. Let's start at the first one, 15% tariffs. They're going to do that. They're going to do that.
Okay, they're going to do that. Have a look at what that means. An American car manufacturer, for example, gets 20 or 25 or 40% tariffs on the steel, the aluminium, and the things and the parts that they need to build their car in America. They've got tariffs in America to build a car. So it's actually cheaper to export a Renault or a Peugeot or a Fiat into the United States because there's only a 15% tariff. That's a win for Europe. That's actually a win. It's going to be cheaper to buy a European car than it is to buy an American car.
Do we know that the European cars are going to be? The United States usually protects the auto industry in the United States, which is the reason why we don't allow it.
Japan too. The Japanese car making industry, auto industry, must be clapping their hands with glee and high-fiving each other because they now have a 15% tariff on their cars, and America has a 20 to 40% tariff on all the things it needs to build cars because they don't have steel there. There's not enough steel. There's not enough aluminium. It's coming in from Mexico. It's coming in from China too, but it's also coming in from Canada. So this is not a big win for America. It's a big stage show performance. This is the Wizard of Oz. There's smoke, there's mirrors, and there's curtains, and there's a big scary voice. But there's not a reality of a proper deal. That's my opinion.
I so disagree with you on this. Because look, I've been to Europe, right? And if you look at the products and everything else that are coming out of Europe, those products tend to have higher standards. They tend to be safer, especially food products. They tend to taste better. And it sounds like that we are now having an open market where we can export many of our products into the European marketplace. I don't even know what this means for the European Union, whether or not they're going to maintain the standards that they were talking, like they have as a entity for the U.S. products that are coming in. And for the money, or for the, let's say, the energy thing, the United States has already effectively damaged Europe in the context of the European economies. Look at what's taking place in Germany. Look at what's taking place in Italy. Like, they're deindustrializing many of those locations because they've stopped accepting or buying Russian fuel. Yes, they still buy it, but they're buying it through third parties. So Saudi Arabia, India, with the markup. I mean, they're already taking a hit for it, meaning Europe is already doing what Europe is saying and putting into writing in regards to what they want to do. They may not have enough ships. They may not be able to import that much oil. They're going to try. They're going to try. I guess
the United States also has a commitment to deliver LNG to China. The second largest LNG deal in history. It was, at the time it was signed, it was the largest liquid natural gas in history, was signed with China to deliver gas to here. Now, they don't have the ships to deliver to here and there. So what are they going to do? Now, what's going to happen, of course, is that it won't ever arrive in China. It'll be put on a ship somewhere in the United States. It'll be consigned to China. And on paper, China will sell it to Europe. And so Europe will have to pay China to buy American gas, because America has committed to selling billions of dollars worth of liquefied natural gas. This happened about 3 years ago. And then they went out a year later, and it was during the Olympics, the Winter Olympics here, they signed a deal with, I think, Qatar, one of the Middle Eastern countries, to do an even bigger liquefied natural gas deal. Now, the big problem with that is those two deals that China signed have effectively occupied every single LNG ship that exists, because China wants all that LNG. So China is buying it and getting it delivered, and it has the facilities and the port facilities. So if China wants to sell this to someone else, they can. But that is already committed to China. So that's another thing that Ursula probably knew. I hope she would know that.
Interesting. That is super interesting.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, once before, though, it was made clear that the United States didn't have enough LNG to replace the Russian oil that Europe was getting at one point.
It has enough. I'm fairly sure it has enough fuel. What it doesn't have is enough capacity to deliver. With Nord Stream, there's one of the Nord Stream pipes is still operable, and all they need to do is just to turn the cog, and it will start flowing again. And Putin has said this. He said this a couple of times. Germany can have our gas, so they've just got to ask for it. We can just turn it on anytime they want. They wanted to stop it, not us. We're quite happy to sell it to them. Of course, they don't want to buy it. So what they're doing, instead of buying it, is going to India, Saudi, even China, and buying it through third parties. It's still gas, but they're avoiding sanctions, and they're avoiding. I mean, sanction avoidance is crazy. What's the point in having sanctions if you're still going to buy the same gas from a third party at a higher price? It's helped. India's GDP has done very well in the last couple of years as a result of this.
I guess I'm saying Europe has damaged itself. Like, whether they have enough ships, from my understanding, we did not have enough LNG. But again, I'm not going to argue that point. I don't know that it's a flat fact. I'm just saying, and it may have changed over time, like they might have increased the facilities and everything else to accommodate it. But the reporting at the time was that we didn't have enough LNG to supply to Europe to replace everything that they were getting from Russia, especially at the costs that Europe was paying. Europe was paying 5 times more for LNG from the United States. So they are paying more for less. And you make a great point, though. How do you get it to Europe if you don't have the infrastructure to get it to Europe over the course
they don't have the ships. And even if they have the ships, they don't have enough ports to take in.
Exactly.
I mean, currently they're taking LNG from America, but I think last year was $28 billion. If you're taking 750 billion over 3 years, and 28 billion was 1 year's total, then how are you going to manage that? Where's that gas coming from is one question. How does it get from one place to another is another question. And how do you process it once it arrives? You've got to build the facilities to offload that gas. And they do have some facilities, of course, but they don't have all of the facilities they need, because for the last 20 years or so, they've been relying on Nord Stream, or not 20, last few years, they've been relying on Nord Stream until Nord Stream was cut off. Now that's coming in through a place that can take gas, hold gas, and distribute gas, but it's not a port. It's a pipeline.
So we are talking about like a decade worth of infrastructure building in order to even make this work.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know how long it takes to build that kind of port, but I'm sure China could do it if they asked.
Well, that's the other interesting part. It seems like a choice was going to have to be made between, do we want to deal with China or do we want to deal with the United States? Their meeting with China lasted only a day, and then they left early.
Yeah.
And then they went to the U.S. and said, Daddy, we're home. Help, give us, throw us a bone. I'm curious on your take on China and the European connection. I mean, it seemed that Europe at one point was saying, hey, we're not going to take a lesson from the United States on this. You're not going to force us into the situation. We're a power. We're not going to tolerate this. We're going to go to China if we need to. And there was a lot of talk about Europe making some kind of deal with China. That seems to be off at this point.
No, it's not off at all. The European Union consists of 26 countries, 26 individual countries with a combined governance. So there are also two things in that combined governance. You have a European Parliament, which is elected, and they make the rules. And in that Parliament, you have people from every country represented. And then you have a European Commission, which manages the European Union. So the European Commission was here talking with Trump. Now, the European Commission does not control any of this trade. Each country controls its own trade. They have autonomy to deal with whoever they want to deal with, but then they have laws that are written for the entire union. So they have unity, but that unity is fractured at the moment. It's not going. France is not very happy with Germany. Germany's not very happy with Spain. Spain is not very happy with anyone. Hungary is not even in the union, but it is in the union. Serbia wants to be in and has been trying for 14 years to get in, but is not getting in because of the Kosovo issue. Now, all of these things are America's way of creating distractions, creating division. America does this very, very well. They create division and then they come in and say, oh, we can fix this problem. And of course, it's at your cost and our benefit. So that's why they're doing that. So von der Leyen is not an elected representative of the European Union per se. She's an elected commissioner of the Europe. She's elected by the Union to represent the European Union. She doesn't come here with trade deals. She doesn't come here with business people. The president of France, the ministers, the trade ministers, they have all been here and they are all doing deals with China. There's a lot of deals going on. And Hungary is very big with China at the moment. It has been for a while. Serbia is doing well with China, has been for a while. Now, these are countries that are outliers inside of the European Union. Serbia is not really a member, but it's 14 years sitting on the periphery, not allowed to have a full membership yet. So at some stage in the future, I think those Balkan countries, if we can call them that, they are going to kind of graduate away to the Eurasian Economic Union, which is 5 countries, including Russia as one of them. I think it's Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, not Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a partner to it. Kazakhstan. There's 4 stands in Russia. And they are the Eurasian Economic Union. They have more in common, I think, with the Balkan countries than Europeans do. So I think you'll probably see a shift to that kind of thing. And they're very big with China. They're a trade partner with China. They have a free trade agreement with Iran. So you've got Russia and 4 other countries dealing with Iran in a free trade agreement. So there's a lot of things going on that you just don't hear or read about in Western media that really show that the balance of trade, the balance of power in trade, and I don't mean military power, I mean the economic power that each country has. America is much less important than it used to be. And I think individually countries in the European Union are recognizing that. Spain in particular has walked away and it's not interested in being part of NATO and spending 5% and then supporting Israel. It just doesn't want to do that. It wants that to change. So we've seen this already fracturing inside of the European Union. I wouldn't be surprised if we have a few more Brexit-style things happening. But I think probably what will have to happen is von der Leyen needs to sit down with each of the leaders of each of the European countries and say, okay, how do we handle this? And I don't think the European leaders really want to deal with her to do that. So we've got all sorts of things going on there. How it will end, I don't know. I really don't. And to be quite honest, I don't follow European politics very much. No need to. I'm sitting in China.
No, I get that. And I guess I got that wrong. I need to go check that. I thought the European Union functioned as a bloc, a trading bloc, kind of like the United States.
It does function as a trading bloc. Don't misunderstand me. It's a united trading bloc. It is one bloc in the same way that ASEAN is a bloc and BRICS is a bloc. But each country has autonomy to do what it wants to do, where it wants to do it. Now, what would happen if one of those countries signed up to the Belt and Road Initiative would probably create divisions inside of that bloc. These are the things that this is the politics inside of the bloc. But yeah, the European Union can say, we're going to put a tariff of this much money on everything coming into the European Union, and that applies to every single country inside of the Union. Now, that's why they have an elected parliament to vote on those things. That's the process of democracy that they have. But then von der Leyen is not the person to make those deals. Von der Leyen is part of the management of the Union. She's not a trade negotiator. Each country negotiates their own trade.
I see. I'm going to go to China because I just want to. Yeah, let's go to China. So, or let's go. Yeah, Taiwan. Taiwan is part of China.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it took me a moment. I was like, wait a minute, Taiwan is part of China. So, one of the things you pointed out, actually, was there anything that came to the forefront of your mind? You pointed out the recall votes that were taking place in Taiwan. Now, I saw this, and this is pretty amazing when you think about it. For one, the Taiwanese parliament is rather insane. They're putting on like football gear and pulling out bills and everything else and fighting in parliament. I've never seen anything like that's not true. The Turkish parliament was that way too. So was Japanese parliament.
Have you ever seen pig entrails thrown across the parliamentary floor?
I have not.
That has happened in Taiwan.
Oh, that is disgusting. Yeah. You're pointing out the recall votes. Go into that for me. So the recall votes is where they were pulling, I think it was DPP.
A year or so ago, there was an election in Taiwan. Now, what happened in Taiwan? There are basically three schools of thought in Taiwan. There's the independent school of thought, which is actually quite small. There's the reunion school of thought to the mainland, which is also quite small. And there's the status quo, which is quite large. So effectively, you have these two peripherals. A lot of people want to be independent of China. A lot of people want to be part of China. And a lot of people in the middle say, no, we're quite happy where we are. This is the status quo. And China itself, strangely enough, is quite happy to remain the status quo for the time being. China wants reunion. No question about that. But they're happy to go with the status quo at the moment. The moment anybody says, we are going to go independent, that's the time that China will say, no, you're not. Yeah. So what happened in the election last year was the winner of the presidential seat is a independent American-minded person. Now, people call him a puppet. He's very strongly related to America. His vice president is actually an American citizen, I believe, but she's certainly educated. These people are educated in America by Americans, supported by Americans. They get all their donations through the National Endowment for Democracy and organizations like that. So they're very much American-leaning people. That's how they get into this position of power. So he got in because the status quo and the pro-reunion vote was split in half because a new party was created by the mayor of Taipei. The former mayor of Taipei decided to stand for presidency and created his own parliament, his own party, And what happened then, because those two people are both more pro-China than pro-America, it split the vote in two. He was a very popular person. So 60% of the vote went to the pro-status quo, pro-China, but 40% of the vote went to the pro-America, and that's the person who won the presidency. So there we now have this guy, William Lai. He is the president of this in China, they call him the leader. They don't call him the president, because how can you be the president of a province? But nominally, he's the president of the province of Taiwan. Now, he is pro-America. And the parliament, which is called the Legislative Yuan, that he presides over, is actually much more in favor of the status quo and the pro-reunion parties. So we've got a parliament that he didn't like. So democratically elected representatives, he decided there is this thing, it's a very peculiar Taiwanese thing called a recall. If he thought that there was a problem with the vote when they got in, he could have a recall vote. So here we are almost a year later with a recall on the vote. And I think it was 25 parliamentarians had to re-stand for their own seat. Every single one of them was a more pro-China than pro-American person. Now, they weren't all pro-reunion. There were some pro-status quo, but they were not pro-America. And 25 of them, if he'd won 5 or 6, he would have gained control of the House. But he won a big fat 0.
Really?
Every single one of them was re-elected back in the position and is now confirmed. So now they're saying, well, this wasn't about party politics. This was about something else. So there we have a double whammy for the pro-American camp in Taiwan. They have lost. They lost the original election. They did get the president in place, but only with 40% of the vote. 60% of the vote was for the other two, and it got split. That was the problem that they had. And I don't know if I can confirm this, but I'm fairly sure that there would have been American funding for the new party because it would have split that vote very nicely. It would have suited the Americans to split that vote. So if you can imagine that you don't have things like primaries, you just had a split in the vote. And so 60% of the people who wanted to remain closer to China voted for their preferred candidate, but the guy who got 40% of the vote won because he got the highest number. They got 27 and 33%, and this guy got 40%. So that's how we ended up with a pro-American president in Taiwan. And now he has failed in his bid to remove the candidates that he didn't like.
So the population effectively said, we don't like what you're doing. This is a no.
Population, a lot of the people, there are very few similarities between what's happening in Ukraine and what's happening in Taiwan. Very few. But a lot of people are making comparisons. And it's a fair comparison because what they're seeing now is America giving them a great deal of support until it no longer suits them to support it, and then they'll back off. America has done this to Ukraine. It's now saying to Ukraine, you're Europe's problem, you're not our problem. And that is one of the reasons why Europe has to buy more equipment from the military in America, because they don't have enough. They've got to buy it from America. America currently doesn't have enough either. That's another story. We could go into what they depleted in the 12-day war with Iran, if they want to call it that. The 12-day conflict. But that's a different story. America now is backing away from Ukraine. Zelensky is dead in the water. He's a dead man walking at the moment in terms of his political career because he has closed down the anti-corruption, the American-founded anti-corruption organization. Yes. And the moment he closed that down, all of America's press turned on him because all of his parliament, they've got massive houses and they've got lots of money. They've got Rolls Royces and they've got all the things that they want. His wife goes shopping in Paris. All this kind of thing is going on. And I think we might see the end of Zelensky fairly soon because he can't survive this. I'm sure he can't survive this. But what Taiwan is doing is looking at this and saying, well, hang on, if America's not going to support its closest ally and it's, we are with you to the end. That was the claim. It came from a president, and the next president comes in and said, yeah, but he was an idiot. So one president says, my predecessor who made that decision was an idiot, so I'm not going to go with that. And he actually said this. It was a stupid president. So that's what Taiwanese are looking at right now, I think. They're looking at this and saying, well, hang on, even NVIDIA, which is a massive company, and then TSMC, all of these things are coming in through Taiwan, the microchips. Jensen Huang of NVIDIA and the people who run TSMC, they're all saying the same thing. We have to deal with China. We have no choice but deal with China. Otherwise, our market is dead. And China will come back, and they already have come back, with a better quality chip than we can provide them. China is now going to leapfrog the technology that they had and were selling to China, and China was happily buying and paying for. But as soon as they put restrictions on this, China said, well, if we've got restrictions on what we can buy, we better make our own. Now, everyone said they can never do that. They're doing it. They've done it.
I don't know why they would say that. No, you're so right. And I used to wonder, some of my guests I would ask, does Taiwan see what is happening to Ukraine? And why do they think that wouldn't happen to Taiwan? Like, meaning China has been they're very slow to move. They're very slow to act. They're buying, we need time. If we have time, we're going to build better ships. We're going to make better products, etc. And at some point, America is going to say, this is not worth us losing.
They would lose. For sure, they would lose. But they don't really care too much about losing proxies. So they would very much like the Philippines to be involved in this. They would very much like Japan and Korea to be involved in this, and Australia too. I mean, I'm an Australian and I hate seeing this. I hate saying this, but Australia are being absolutely mad. They're allowing Americans to use Australia as a forward base for the Pacific region.
Yes.
But China has said quite categorically, it will never invade Taiwan. You can't invade. It's a civil war. You can't invade your own country. But what it will do is defend Taiwan from being taken away. So that's what China has said it will do. It will defend Taiwan. It has never ruled out military force, but it's never actually ruled it in either. So you can't say, all these experts say, oh, China doesn't rule out military force. That's true. But have you asked them, and what did they say? They have always said, we will defend Taiwan. And that's what they plan to do. They have plans to do it. And every single war game scenario that America has done has had America losing. They can't win. So they're not going to go to war. It's as simple as that. So they will wait. And we just had an announcement from the UK, the defense secretary or defense minister and the foreign secretary are in Australia, or were in Australia yesterday or the day before, making an announcement that Australia and the UK will fight together if Taiwan needs them. That is a very, Australia didn't say this, the UK said this, but they were in Australia when they said it. That is an indication that they no longer recognize the one China policy.
Yes.
And that is a very serious position to be in. That's a red line for China. That's a very big red line for China. If you're saying you're going to come to war against China, why are China going to sell you anything?
No, that's a good point. But it seems like they were salami slicing that. It seemed like they didn't believe the one China policy for a while. They would get lip service, but it didn't seem like they believe it.
For a long time, it's been what they call strategic ambiguity. It's not really lip service. They have always said, the Americans and the British and the Australian Prime Minister is very ambiguous on this. He basically says, we want the status quo. We're happy we recognize the one China policy. Beijing is the capital of China. We know that. He's doing all of that. And he was here just a week or so ago as well. And I felt he was here for 6 days. And it was both cultural, trade, and diplomatic visits. But he didn't bring his foreign secretary and he didn't bring his defense minister, because those two are the anti-China hawks. So he's got some very serious anti-China on his front bench, and he's got a very hostile media. So it's going to take a couple of years, but he's just been re-elected just in May this year. They only have 3-year terms. But he's just been re-elected, and I think he'll probably come through with a bit more confidence. His first 3 years, he just sat on the fence. Now he's actually he met with, in the second term, he met with Xi Jinping before he met with Trump, and that's a telling thing. He did try and meet Trump, but Trump let him down, and that's another telling thing. Why didn't Trump meet with him? They had the opportunity, but he had to go and do something else.
I'm curious. Do you think Australia would go to war in this way?
I
know war is. But do you think they would?
The problem with Australia, if you want a yes or no answer to that,
yes, I'm going to pin you down.
My answer is no. The only reason Australia would go to war is if there's a war to go to and China isn't going to war. So the answer is no. However, what you need to understand about America is that it is 100% infiltrated by American interests. The defense, the logistics, the retail, the agriculture, the finance, everything is completely controlled by American corporate interests or American military interests. And many of their government departments many of their government leaders are trained in America. They've been to America and had American indoctrinations, brainwashing, we can call it. But these are people, Australia is very much under the control. And I don't think most Australians realize this. There's a man called Clinton Fernandez, who's an academic who wrote a paper on this quite recently. And in that paper, it's something like 60% of Australia's economy is controlled by American corporate interests.
Really?
And it was, the banks are owned by there's four big banks. There's four major banks in Australia. They're all controlled by BlackRock. They're all of them, all four of them. So if you walk into a bank, you're walking into a building that is asset managed by this. Your staff teller is managed by a human resource company that is an American corporation. The money that you send from one place to another is sent through the SWIFT system, which goes in. Why does it take 3 days to send a few dollars from me to my daughter in Australia? It takes 3 days. Why? Who's got that money for 3 days? This is electronic transactions. It shouldn't take 3 days. China's system takes 3 seconds. Bang, your money's gone. And it's there. It's arrived. So China has a CIPS system, which is taking over from the SWIFT system for some transactions. And it's instant, and it costs next to nothing. Why does it cost me money to put my money into American control for several days while they use it on the short-term money market and then give it to my daughter who's been waiting for it since, I send it on Monday and she gets it on Thursday. Why does that happen? Because America's got control over this. So the SWIFT system is not American, but the system that underlies it does. If you go on to, we're on an American system now. You go on to Microsoft, you go on to Apple, iOS systems, everything is controlled by America. And Australia is the same. It's even worse in Australia. The logistics, transportation, the public utilities, the retail outlets, the agriculture, much of it is controlled by American interests. And we've got these organizations like the Lowy Institute and the ASPI, the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, which are getting funded by America to denigrate China and say China's a great big threat to you. I actually have Australian friends who believe that China is preparing, after it has taken over Taiwan, to roll over and take over Australia. I said, have you any idea? Taiwan's 137 kilometers away from the coast of China. Actually, parts of it are only 2 kilometers away, but Taiwan Island, the main island, is 137 kilometers away. Sydney's another 10,000 kilometers. How are they going to get there with enough manpower? It's a stupid thing to think about. But everybody, not everybody, a lot of people in Australia believe this is true. It's crazy. And they believe it because it's been in their papers for years, for at least 10 years. Almost every newspaper, almost every day, you pick it up and there's a threat from China.
So it's not so much that the average regular Australian would be gung-ho for this. It's more so that the corporate space, political space, may be on board.
I haven't been to Australia for 6 years. Last time I was there was 2019. It was before COVID. And I was in a bar in Australia, in Brisbane, and I was talking to a guy, and I said I lived in China. He said, "Oh, what do you think about that then, mate?" And I said, "Well, it's quite good. It's a nice place to live." Hey. And that was the answer. You're not going to tell me China's a good place. This is an ordinary guy in a bar, and wow. If I go shopping, I got to the point where I self-censored. I just, I've been living overseas for a while, left it at that. I didn't tell people I was in China. My daughter doesn't tell anybody that she works with. I hope they're not watching this. And she looks like me. My daughter doesn't tell anyone that she works with that her dad lives in China.
Really?
She self-censors on that. She said it just causes arguments.
But
because
70%,
people do believe this.
But it's something like 70% of the Australian economy is coming out of China or
right.
Trade.
Yeah.
How does that work? How does that work?
If I could answer that, I would be the genius that you think I am. I don't know.
That's disheartening. That's very disheartening.
It is.
That
It
is
really
very
is.
disheartening.
And it's purely because of misinformation. Even the ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, has been infiltrated. People get fired because Rupert Murdoch wants them fired. Rupert Murdoch is an Australian-born American citizen who owns Fox News. And I mean, he supports Trump and his son supports whoever the other one is. So they've got feet in both camps. Lachlan Murdoch and Rupert Murdoch will have different political. They're not political at all. They are purely and simply self-serving. They're serving their own interests. So they own, this is another problem in Australia, they own something like 60% of all media in Australia. An American family owns 60% of all media in Australia and has influence in all the other media as well, because everybody at some stage has worked for Murdoch Press. So that's you move up through the ranks, you get pulled off headhunted away by other stations or other media groups. That's how it works. And Rupert Murdoch lets them go to the ABC, take this senior position in the ABC, and we'll feed you things that need to be put on. We'll help you. We'll help your career. And that's how it works in media. Now, every journalist in Australia would deny that, but just pick up any newspaper in Australia and you'll find the same story. There is only one city in Australia that does not have every single newspaper. And I'm talking about the little local newspapers, the free ones that you pick up in the stores, and the city newspapers are all owned by the Murdoch Corporation. News Corp.
Wow.
Mm.
That is a free
It's
press.
It's
That is a free press.
And, when that guy wants to create a problem for you, you have a problem, because it doesn't matter what you've done. Every single newspaper and half the TV stations are saying you've done this. Doesn't matter. And they don't say this person did this. They ask the question. They pose it as a question and everybody thinks it's real. That's how media misinforms us. They pose questions. Is China going to attack Australia? Well, of course it's not. But then they've got a whole lot of expert opinions that say China has built the largest military force in the world over the last 20 years. No question about that. But where have they ever invaded? Nowhere. In the last 20 years, China has been nowhere except one international grouping in Djibouti, because there was an international requirement to have anti-piracy there. The Americans are there, the French are there, the Germans are there, the Swedes are there, the Chinese are there. So they have a military base in Djibouti. Despite all the stories that you see, there are no military bases in the South China Sea. They have built a couple of airstrips and they've got some weather stations on there. Not one person can ever show me a photograph of a soldier, a sailor, an airman, and there was only one event where an aircraft that was a military aircraft landed on there, and that was to pick up two people who'd been injured in an industrial accident, pick them up, take them to the mainland for hospital care. That's the only time in history a military plane has landed. Now, then they say, but they could use it for military. Well, yeah, they could, but they haven't yet. They could use Gwadar port in Pakistan for military. Yes, they could, but they haven't. They could use this port they're building in Guinea-Bissau in West Africa for military. They could, but they want it there for iron ore that's coming out. It's not a military base. It's an iron ore transshipping base. That's all it is. They could do something. China may very well use this for whatever purposes that they have on their agenda for today. So all these things that could be done is what are reported. And people don't notice the modals they could, might, will, should, must. These are words that media use very, very cleverly. Modals. They could do something, but they haven't.
Every accusation is a confession. That is what I've come to the conclusion.
So far, that's also deemed to be true.
It's very true. Every accusation is a confession. When they put stuff up, the U.S. has 800, if not more, military bases around the world. It is astonishing to me that the U.S. is, oh God, China is militarizing this area. Dude, serious? Are you being serious right now? I'm curious on your take on something else. There is a lot of talk that has been coming out about 2027, where they would say Russia could invade NATO and China could take Taiwan. Yeah. And we're thinking this is 2027.
Yeah,
Do
they
you get
could.
the sense that this is not China looking at 2027. This is Europe looking at 2027. The US looking at
Yeah,
2027.
this is the US's timeline. It's got nothing at
Yeah.
all to do with China. Nobody in China has said this ever. Nobody in China has ever said they're going to take Taiwan ever. Not one person, not even Xi Jinping, not even the defense secretary, not one media outlet in China has ever said we're going to take Taiwan ever. They've always said we're looking forward to reunification with Taiwan. And in fact, Xi Jinping has said we'll wait 1,000 years for it. But for some reason, they seem to think that Xi Jinping will retire or be. That was another thing. He's going to be ousted in the next. In the last 2 days, I've received emails from people telling me that China is in chaos. Is it? I just traveled right there from China. I was 10 hours on a high-speed train just 3 days ago, and I saw
said
no
Putin had
chaos
cancer.
anywhere.
If you remember, they said Putin had cancer. Putin was going to jump off.
Putin had cancer. Well, Xi Jinping is going to be deposed. One person said in the next 10 days, and another person said within 8 weeks. So let's see if that happens. It could happen.
That's amazing.
It's not likely to happen. No, the idea of this 2027 is purely and simply speculation. And the reason they're speculating that is because they know for a fact that China's military defenses will be at their peak at 2027. They know that they have little chance, no chance of defeating China in China now. Now, here's the difference. People say to me, why doesn't China get involved in the Middle East? China is not an offensive force. It doesn't have the military capability to take an army to another area. It hasn't built the logistics support to do that. It's built an army that stays in China. Now, They do have one base in Djibouti, and they built a base, and they had to build a naval base and a military base next to it so that they could have the logistics support. But they don't have the capability of going off to do huge military expansion projects the way America can and has done in the past. They're simply built as a defensive force.
But Jerry, that's the U.S. plan, though. That the idea that China's built a defensive force to defend China. And so the U.S. with the ability to project nothing. That's what you should do as a country. But what the U.S. is looking at is we need to hobble China in some way. We know. And the reason why I was actually about 2027, not because it's a Chinese plan, but because it is something that the American, as I say, every accusation is a confession. Yeah. Is it that the US and Europe is looking at 2027 at a time where they need to provoke some kind of activity using Taiwan or something else? And one last point for this before I let you answer it. The US is looking at China's defensive posture as a weakness, with the belief that, well, we can damage their capability of moving products around the globe, then we can somehow damage China in and of itself. Meaning China is such a magnificent industrial power that part of their power is being able to send goods and items around the world. And if the US can somehow hobble that, because we are let's say, a projection of power around the globe, then that can somehow damage China's ability to advance. That's the way they're looking at it. They're looking at it as if we can destroy their shipping, if we can somehow create war zones, that China has to defend their shipping goods. I mean, give me your take on that. I mean, do you think, for one, do you think that'll work? And B, do you think the 2027 thing is a provocation year, either using Taiwan as that provocation? As you point out, the US is trying to use that as a proxy.
Yeah, for sure, if there's going to be a provocation, Taiwan would be it. They tried to destabilize China through Tibet 70 years ago. They tried to destabilize China 20 years ago through Xinjiang. They've tried to destabilize China through Hong Kong. They've tried to destabilize China through Taiwan. So these are the four big destabilization things, pretty much. And I don't know if your audience are really aware of this, but the Tibetan thing and the Xinjiang thing have been totally debunked. I've been to Hong Kong, I don't know how many times since the 2019 protests. I'm going there again the day after tomorrow. I've got friends in Hong Kong. They are Hong Kong Chinese. And I've got friends who are foreigners living there. And I haven't yet met a person. I haven't personally met a person who wants Hong Kong to be independent ever
Yeah.
anywhere, not in mainland China. And there's a lot of Hong Kong people living here where I live because it's just a 90-minute ferry ride away. So it's very, very close. So those three things are kind of, they're on the back burner now, and they're just bubbling away. And they're trying to build the Tibetan thing back up because there's a dam being built there. And this is a terrible thing. It's not a terrible thing, but that's another story for another day. Taiwan is the provocation. If they had been successful in this recall, and the president, the governor of the province, had managed to gain control of the legislative yuan, then I think this would have been a much worse situation. Right now, China is probably going, thank God for that. It didn't go the way that America wanted it to go, and that has given a bit of a reprieve, because now the world has seen Taiwan has a democratic process that worked, and they're happy with that. So the democratic process worked a year ago or November last year I think it was November, maybe January, I can't remember now, a few months ago in the elections, and it worked again in the recall. So it's all sorted now, and I think that's okay. So I don't think we have the same catalyst that we would have had before. Now, let's talk about how the Americans could do this. They've got 12 aircraft carriers, of which I think only 3 are in the water at any given time. UK has one, which is not really very functional, and it's not working. It's in Australia at the moment, and it's a good little prize. It's full of American F-35s, and I can't imagine American air pilots and American crews on a British Royal Navy ship and getting along quite well. I just think they'd have to keep their mess rooms separated, otherwise there'd be brawls every night.
Why do you say that?
Well, I know a lot of Royal Navy. In my day, I knew a lot of Royal Navy sailors. They don't take kindly to those Yankee types. If you spend a bit of time in places like Portsmouth, where there's a lot of Navy people there, you get to know the kind of people that they are. It would be fun to be on that ship as an observer, for sure. Okay. Anyway, putting that aside, what are they going to do? They're going to blockade the ports. Which port are they going to blockade? So probably a Hong Kong port is a very busy one. Shanghai port is a very busy one. There's a couple of other ports, Dalian port. There's probably 3 or 4 major, huge ports that they could blockade with the troops that they've got. They could blockade those ports. But there's 40 other ports that China could use that they couldn't blockade. So China would be able to run ships in and out. They just change directions. And they don't have enough ships for the South China Sea. Yes, there are choke points, and the Malacca Straits is one. There's a couple of other choke points that they say we can choke off China there. But the fact is, China has subdued the problems that America caused in Xinjiang, and now has train lines. There's 500 trains a year going in and out of China through Xinjiang and through Inner Mongolia. So you see a little bit of destabilizing attempts in Inner Mongolia as well, because these are places that China can get out without going to the sea. Now there's also the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is a link, and it's a road, but it's going to be a rail, which will go through Afghanistan eventually into the port of Gwadar, and that cuts off half of the journey. So they can take a train to the port of Gwadar. This is why Americans don't like China being in Pakistan, because the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is working very, very well. And that is in the state of Balochistan, which is the place that's got all of the problems, again, through American interference. And it happens to be the largest province of Pakistan, and it borders Iran. So America loves that place for causing problems. But the fact is, China has many different ways. It's got oil and gas coming in by pipeline from Russia and Mongolia. It's got coal coming in by trucks and trains from Mongolia. I just cycled through the coal areas in Shanxi. It's massive, massive. These trains go past and they have 60, 70-ton carriages, 60, 70-ton carriages. And then it's gone. And about 3 minutes later, you hear another one is coming past. These things are so regular. They're moving stuff around by train. I don't think it's going to be the success that the West would think that it would be. That's my view. A blockade would certainly hurt, but it wouldn't. You don't have enough ships. Even if they get all of their allies together, There wouldn't be enough ships to blockade. And China has something very special called the Carrier Killer, which is a hypersonic missile that can be fired from the back of a truck. They don't know where they are. I don't know where they are. China knows where they are, but the Americans don't know where they are because they can move them anytime they want. And these things can fire things 1,800 kilometers. They're sitting in the middle and the far west of China. They can fire something 1,800 kilometers and they can hit the top of a drawing pin. That's how accurate they are. And they're hypersonic. There's no defense against them. They've also got tens of thousands of drones. America doesn't stand a chance. If it comes to China with a war, it's not going to have a chance. If China were to go out and take America on in the open seas, then for sure America would prevail, I'm sure. But I don't think they can win a war of attrition in China. The other thing is that Chinese people are very patriotic. If Americans land in China, they wouldn't get a very nice welcome. If an American comes and says, I'm here to rescue you from the dreaded CCP, they'd get shot in the head.
I'm here to rescue. Yeah, I'm America. I'm here to help you out. Last question. Do you think that they would be stupid enough to provoke a war in this way?
Trump is the peaceful president, isn't he?
That's what he says.
Yeah.
That's what he says. That's what his mouth says. That's what his mouth says.
His mouth may say that, but his administration don't. He's surrounded himself with war hawks. You've got people like Elbridge Colby in there. He's the guy who wrote the Strategy of Denial, and he wrote this a few years ago to show how to blockade China. And basically, his theory would fail after 2027 because China would have all the necessary means. And I think that's why they've got this deadline in their minds. They've got to do this by 2027. And I think the bottom line is they'd be crazy to start, but that doesn't mean they wouldn't. I would say no. America will not start a war. There would be too many body bags going home. There would be, and far too many people would end up in Davy Jones's locker. Yeah. Those carrier killers will just take out a carrier, bang. Now, there's going to be, what's America going to do? It's going to retaliate with nuclear weapons. China has the defenses. You put a nuclear weapon up against China, China has signed the non-first strike treaty. China is the only country in the world that has nuclear weapons that has guaranteed it will not first strike anyone. Other countries have signed it with conditions. They won't first strike against a country that hasn't got nuclear weapons or something like that. China is the only country that has signed a treaty that says they will not first strike with a nuclear weapon. But the moment a submarine off the Chinese coast puts up a nuclear weapon, bang, China's going to say, okay, Washington, you're done, because they've got them on hypersonics. And that's something America doesn't have yet. Russia and China and Iran have hypersonics. So I don't think anybody in the American administration would be stupid enough to do that. So if they lost a carrier, they should really just pull back out and say, shit, we had no idea that was coming. And we're sorry. But I can't see any American ever doing that. They're going to say, oh, look what China did to us. We're going to hit them bigger, harder. Well, that would be a nuclear war. And that is what must be avoided at all costs. That mad, the mutually assured destruction. So I can't see any American being stupid enough to start something they know they can't finish, they know they can't win, and the only way to win it is total obliteration of the human race, basically.
Jerry, from your mouth to God's ears, thank you for this. Great. Okay. You are always a great guest, man. Jerry Gray, he was born in the UK. He lived in Australia. He is now living in China, pushing back on much of the propaganda that is coming out of the West, trying to give, let's say, a legit, genuine take on what China is actually like in politics and everything else. Jerry, thank you for this, man. You have my deepest appreciation. Be safe.
Thank you very much indeed.
All right, bye-bye. All right, I'm going from one damn good guest to another. We are joined with the man himself, Mark Sleboda. Mark Sleboda is an international relations security analyst. Mark, oh, by the way, you can find Mark on Boosty, Boosty, Real Politic with Mark Sleboda, or you can just put in his name. Both will bring him up. How you doing, Mark? You doing okay this morning? Well, this afternoon.
Tomorrow. Thanks for having me on the show. It's always an honor and a pleasure. And I'm alive. How are you?
I am also alive. I'm doing well. Mark, I have been watching. Let's start with Pokrovsk, I think is the way it's pronounced. Can you give us some idea of why that's significant?
About why it's significant?
Yes, because it seems to be falling. Russia has completely invaded Ukraine, doesn't seem to have the manpower in order to maintain it. From my understanding, looking at the map, it's a logistics hub, or at least it used to be a logistics hub.
Yeah.
Ukrainian troops are seemingly pulling out, or at the very least in some parts are pulling out. Give us an understanding of its significance, or does it remain significant? Have they removed this as a logistic hub as they saw it collapsing?
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, it effectively no longer functions as a logistic hub, right? Certainly within the last month, because what Russian forces did in the south central Donbass is they moved in and they began the process, a months-long process of putting Pokrovsk effectively under siege. And as part of that, they wiped out everything else in the south central Donbass. So first Sleboda, then Karahava, these other that were logistic nodes of lesser significance than Pokrovsk, but still important on a strategic level. And they slowly isolated all of the remaining villages, towns, and settlements in the area from Pokrovsk, took those out. And now what we see is within the last 2 or 3 weeks, Russia has tightened the noose, and Pokrovsk came under operational encirclement. And what that means is that all of the supply lines going into Krovsk are either physically cut off, or they are under heavy fire from Russian artillery and drone strikes, drone capability. And now, within the last week, Russia has quite unexpectedly broken through the Kiev regime defenses north of the city in a very wide, deep, and penetrating flanking maneuver, which is effectively threatening Pokrovsk with physical encirclement, a tantamount to it, not 100%, but to a very large degree. It's separating the battlefield between Pokrovsk and Konstantinovka, with Russian forces, straight up the middle and the rear. And at this point, even Kiev regime sources have admitted, as you point out, they don't have the manpower left to defend Pokrovsk. As of last week, Russian diversion and reconnaissance groups were operating from within central Pokrovsk. They had obviously penetrated the city. They were conducting ambushes on Kiev regime forces from within the center of the city, and we have video evidence of that, right? I mean, this is something that Kiev regime forces, have and interlocutors on social media have grudgingly admitted. Of course, there's not really much commentary about any of this in the Western media, because they don't want to talk about how bad the situation is there. Now, as to what happens when Pokrovsk is gone, because already it's ceased to function as a logistics hub, but of course, it's also important to remove it from the table completely. But once it's gone completely, having already accomplished the removal of its ability to serve as a logistic hubs for the rest of the Kiev regime forces in the Donbass region, it also now opens up a whole new swath of territory behind it, where there are no further significant strongholds further deep and north into the Dnepropetrovsk region, to the west of it, essentially all the way to near the banks of the Dnieper River, right? So it's going to lead to Russian forces essentially, then moving in concentrated force, north to take care of Konstantinovka, the southernmost of the Kiev regime's last defensive line. But also they'll then be pushing much further and deeper west into the Dnepropetrovsk region across a much wider front. And the Dnepropetrovsk region is going to be imperiled to a speed and degree that we never saw in the Donbass, right? Yeah. Because they don't have the decade of built-up defenses, and also the topography, the terrain. It's not this hilly area with these built-up urban agglomerations. It's essentially steppe, and that will heavily favor an offense which not only has logistical and vehicle superiority, but also has complete air dominance over the territory as well. So Dnepropetrovsk is going to be rolled up much faster than what we've become used to in this conflict. Once the Russians are, shall we say, focused on it. At the moment, yes, we've seen penetrations further south from Pokrovsk into the Dnepropetrovsk region, but that it's still on a relatively small scale because the priority in this direction remains the Donbass area. But this is going to set things up for probably next spring. There is a strong possibility that Russia will be able to finish up or all but finish up the Kiev regime's last defensive positions in the Donbass, the Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Konstantinovka line by the end of the year. And then they'll have everything essentially up to the Dnepropetrovsk region in the Donbass area, right up to the Dnepropetrovsk. And also Russian forces have begun pushing from the south in the Zaporozhye region as well. So basically the whole south of Ukraine, east of the Dnieper River, is going to come under a two-pronged attack sometime next year, which basically means cleaning everything on the east bank of the left bank, the east bank of the Dnieper River.
But if they don't have enough troops in order to maintain Pokrovsk, you don't believe in a military collapse. You think
not like most people think. Not like we just can't fight anymore. We're going to sign papers and that's going to be it. No, I think you will see more localized crumbling. You will see the Kiev regime no longer able to defend and no longer trying to defend everywhere, because at the moment they're still largely trying to defend everywhere, right? Russian forces are for the first time now discovering stretches of the front where there are no troops, towns where there are no troops, right? That is really the first time in the past few weeks that Russian forces have done that. That is an increasing sign of what will be identified in the future as a collapse. But it's not like some people just think the war will, one day it'll collapse and that'll be it and the war will be over. It's not going to be like that. I don't believe it's going to be like that. Unfortunately, I think that they will continue fighting with what forces they are able, with what supplies they are able to get from the West to the bitter end. And that will mean Kiev and beyond. But we're still quite a ways away from that.
From the Russian point of view, and I want to move from this, but I'm just curious. From the Russian point of view, though, if they're seeing this level of collapse, where the Ukrainian military doesn't have the capability of defending various towns and areas, Pokrovsk is a really good example. And the reason why I'm focusing on this is because this was a stronghold. This was something that they wanted to militarily defend, and it's clear that they don't have the troops to defend.
Oh, they've already started suddenly Pokrovsk is no longer strategically important, and all the usual copes in the Western media and the social media commentary. But that's. Nothing Russia ever takes in Ukraine has ever had strategic importance, according to them.
I'm trying to point out, though, if they can't defend this, and it's something that they want to defend, and this is going to be something that happens more and more, then you're just looking at a retreat at this point.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, a fighting retreat. It's still it has to be said, right? Pokrovsk has held for months, right? I mean, Russia didn't take it head on. They encircled it. They're doing the smart thing to minimize their own casualties while doing so, and stretching the Kiev regime forces' defensive capabilities out further, which helps hasten the attrition, right? But right now, what we're seeing with this deep penetrating maneuver, this isn't quite what the West, in their military doctrine thinks of as maneuver warfare. But I think it's, the closest we've seen in this conflict, at least since the early days of it, right? It is a deep penetration into the rear. And it's a sign of how things are going to develop into the future. That we'll see more and more such circumstances where Russia is able to operate deeper. And again, part of the reason they're able to do this is because of their superiority in both manpower and logistics.
Do you think they stop at a certain point, or do they keep going?
I don't see the capability. This regime I don't see stopping. And they have now developed, let's just take a look at
Wait, just to be clear. What I mean is Russia.
Meaning, Russia.
Do they chase them to the point of saying, we're going to destroy the military, in which case we need to keep going in order to destroy the military? Yeah. Or do they say, we've liberated the South, or we've liberated the Donbass and Lugansk, we've established a buffer, and we're going to stop here?
That doesn't meet no, I don't think so. That does not meet the goals that have been so clearly and so many times articulated. That meets a number of the goals of the special military operation, but it doesn't ensure that Ukraine never enjoys NATO. It never joins NATO. It doesn't fully denazify or debanderize Ukraine. It substantially accomplishes, but does not ensure the demilitarization of Ukraine into the future. Right? That can only be met by either a political settlement or by complete removal of the regime by physical means. And I think the simply Russia does not want to occupy all of Ukraine. That has never been the goal of this, and it still is what the Kremlin does not want, and I think fears. But they are being left no alternative by the Kiev regime and its Western backers. Right? They will simply have to take everything, because otherwise the active phase will never end.
Pursuant to that, and I'm glad you hit that, with the protests that we're seeing, I have a pet theory with this that I want to get your take on.
Sure.
From my point of view, certain things are going on simultaneously. You get the Trump administration that is going after Russiagate, which means effectively we're trying to untie our hands in regards to making any kind of deal, because Russiagate effectively poisons the well. And so Trump is trying to say, see, I'm not a puppet of Putin. This was all made up by the Clintons and Obamas, et cetera. So there is no association with me and Trump and Russia. And yes, I know that Epstein, that this is trying to be a dodge, but I think this also matters. B, you get Zelensky after the shot was fired from Seymour Hersh's article that they were trying to get rid of Zelensky, trying to solidify his political base. And in doing so, he, A, gets Yermak to reshuffle the government. B, goes after NAPU and SAPO, those quote unquote corruption bureaus that are very bad at their jobs, but was effectively a way for the United States to oversee the Ukrainian government and the behavior that the Ukrainian government was
Okay, even more the Europeans, I would say, than the Americans. But yes, the collective West.
Fair enough, but it was done under Joe Biden. This was one of Joe Biden's things of wanting to push it through. All right. He goes after those, and all of a sudden you get protests out of the blue. Protests. Zelensky sucks. Yermak sucks. Yermak should, quote unquote, F himself. All of this stuff coming out directly at the Zelensky government in and of itself. And they haven't gone anywhere. Zelensky has tried to push through legislation to kind of roll back. And I say kind of because he's talking about lie detector tests.
Okay, but the RADA doesn't even meet for several weeks yet.
And they're
on vacation at the moment. So
to make a long story short, that's a lot of wood to chop. But is it that the U.S. is trying to get rid of Zelensky? And that if Trump wants any kind of deal, that meaning Donald Trump knows that he can get nothing out of Zelensky without Zelensky screaming, "Oh my God, the U.S. is abandoning me." And so from the U.S. point of view, if you want to get anything, that you got to get rid of Zelensky. And that from Trump's point of view, there's a deal to be had. That, yes, Putin is making his demands, and his demands are what they are, but that there's some wiggle room in those demands that the U.S. believes that it can function in order to get some kind of deal. But you have to get rid of Zelensky to get that deal. Meaning, is what we're seeing is the U.S. plan to try to get rid of Zelensky, to try to come up with some deal, some agreement that they think that they can make over the course of the next several years. And pursuant to that, right here, this is Witkoff in a recent interview. Listen to what Witkoff is saying. Yes, he may be out of his mind, but I'm curious on whether this is just thinking in the White House, whether it's true that American president can accept a deal on the Russian standards one way or the other.
That we solve Russia, Ukraine, and we get that peace deal, because it should happen. It's the war that the president is right. That should have never happened. I think we get that solved. Hopefully, that'll be a big moment. I think if we expand the Abraham Peace Accords, if we get a peace, a lasting peace in Gaza, if we figure out long-term peace in the Middle East, if we normalize with the state of Israel, I think that will be a crowning achievement. And then I think your father-in-law would have get what he deserved the last.
Okay, that's a lot of stuff that I think Witkoff is out of his mind on. But that is that if that's the thinking of the White House.
Yeah, that's the foreign policy utopian vision of the Trump administration, right?
Right.
If they got everything they wanted and was able to write the narrative of it, then that would be it, right? But okay, so now what you're suggesting, you're not the first person to suggest it. I know that there are other people in the alt media pushing this. I would say that this is a type of thinking that resurfaces every once in a while. And while I would acknowledge that it is not an impossibility, it is inherently a belief in Trumpian 5D chess, that he has a master plan behind all of this, and that he does indeed mean, to get rid of Zelensky in order to have peace there. I don't see any real signs of it. I got to be honest. I mean, I know there are certain dots, right? The protests are a data point. The Cy Hirsch article is a data point. But myself, I do not see enough to point yet, right? To point to a direct. For one thing, again, these protests, while an annoyance and while, shall we say, leading to more criticism of Zelensky than we've seen in the Western media, are obviously not a regime change attempt. This is not a color revolution, right? They don't have, first of all, who would they replace Zelensky with?
That was my question too.
Yeah. Okay. So in the past week, right, at least two of the major potential replacements of Zelensky, right? Petro Poroshenko, the leader of the European Solidarity Parties, quote unquote, the former Candyman oligarch and leader of the Kiev regime, right? Him and Zelensky hate each other seemingly only on personal bounds, because they both did the exact same things in office, as far as anyone can tell foreign policy wise, and certainly. And Yulia Tymoshenko, right? Another perennial figure, former prime minister, the leader of the Fatherland Party. They both backed what Zelensky did with Nabu and Sapo to the hilt, right? Tymoshenko had an interview, right? And I, examined this on one of my shows on my channel in the last week, where she explicitly said that the Kiev regime needs to remove the levers of European control, right? So obviously she's not a candidate, that is being considered to replace. We haven't heard really much of a squeak out of Zaluzhny, if you can still consider him. And I will always argue that Zaluzhny is no better candidate for peace, if that's your goal, because he is a committed Banderite fascist, right? I mean, Zelensky and Poroshenko before him, they internalized this Banderism because they discovered that is the foundations of the regime that they inherited, that it's built on. They had so they internalized it. Zaluzhny himself is a Banderite. I mean, when he was the commander-in-chief of the Kiev regime's military, we all saw the pictures of his office. He had 2 busts of Stepan Bandera because one wasn't enough. And a bust of Roman Shukovich and the red and black Banderite fascist banner all across the big backdrop, right? So I don't consider him as any... Russia would never accept, even if he was brought online by someone in the West, that we're going to give you power, but in order to do so, you got to sign these capitulation, what he will see as capitulation papers, right? And even if that was the case, Russia would never accept him because they would know that it would just be kicking the can down the road and the war would reignite in this year, 5 years, whatever. So I don't see him. And then, I mean, who else? I mean, Klitschko has been a constant critic of Zelensky from within the Maidan Putsch milieu within the last few years. But I don't see him making any big moves on this or really having the gravitas to take over the country, as Vicky Nuland, pointed all the way out back in 2014.
Yeah, the EU, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't see anyone being positioned for a replacement. And I don't see where anyone that did replace him from within the current Kiev regime political environment would be a real improvement, even if it was so. There's no oligarchs backing these protests. There's no defections of the police, the security services. There's no organizing political party which would give it political power behind this. It's not a regime change attempt. Regime change attempts are a lot more thorough. They cover a lot more bases. And at still to this moment, and we're more than a week into these protests, I don't see any signs of that. Now, it may emerge, and I will come right out and see as soon as I see further data points that this has become a regime change attempt. But I don't see it. Right now, the people out there protesting are mostly the professional protest class, which means those, shall we say, nominally liberal, pro-Western Ukrainians who are directly employed by Western NGOs, and there's a lot of them. So, I mean, and students who have been roped into this, i.e. they mostly are under the ages of 25, which is very important for men because it means that they're still, at the moment, technically supposed to be free of conscription, right? Meaning that they can show their faces in public. Because if they were 25 and showed themselves faces in public, they would be taken by the police and then quietly handed over to the TCC, the conscription press gangs, and never seen from again as they were sent off to defend Pokrovsk or in the trenches, somewhere, and that would be it. I don't see, signs of it. The nationalists, there's no signs of the far right, the battalions, either within the military or those still without it. supporting this. I don't even see much support out of Western political elite for this, right? Yet there's been some minor. Ursula von der Leyen has expressed concern, right? You haven't heard a peep out of the White House because, to be frank, I don't think that Trump really likes Naboo or Sapo much anyway, because once it's explained to him who they are, right, he will remember that they had some, outside role, but in the impeachment move against him back during his first administration, right? So I just don't see the signs of it. And I don't actually believe that the Trump administration is capable of that degree of political maneuvering and silence, such that what they're doing from people who don't approve of it, and there would be many from within his administration who would not approve of it and would immediately, I believe, go to the press with it. I have a more of a cynical Occam's razor take on this yet, again, until I see more data that might suggest otherwise, that the Trump administration is just bumbling through this and they have no plan whatsoever.
Then what do you think the protests are about? Because you would admit that these are fake. This is AstroTurf. And that all of these groups all of a sudden came out the moment that they were trying to, let's say, touch the levers of control of the government. Timoshenko, I believe her name, she gave a speech in Rada effectively saying, we will be a colony if we keep these groups in play. And then
that's what I mentioned there. Yes.
Yeah, then went out to the protest. What do you think is happening there?
Yeah, okay, so I don't believe that these are spontaneous protests because people are so concerned about the commission that elects the director of NABO and SAPO, right? Whether it's the prosecutor general or Zelensky or some group of European. No, I don't believe that. Okay, I think more than likely this is the Europeans and perhaps certain people involved in the United States at a shall we say, White House level, at some lower level, that are reacting to Zelensky consolidating power and are effectively launching a warning shot, right, such as lies within their specific power to do so, of protests against it. They're trying to protect this lever of control over whatever administration is in Kiev, but it does not amount to a regime change effort. And it's more coming out of Europe than it is out of the United States.
See, I would have thought the other way around. And the reason why I say that is Europe loves Zelensky. That's their guy. I mean, if you're talking about like MI6 or some of these other groups, they love him. Whereas the US holds them in contempt. And so,
do you think Europeans really love the European elite? Do you think they really love Zelensky?
I think he fulfills their objective, which is they want this war.
For the moment, he does, right? But they still want those levers of control over him and the Ukrainian government. I'm just, again, a little cynical. When they're happy and hugging and making cute noises under the sheets with Zelensky, I think that it is more, shall we say, geopolitics and foreign policy than it is any actual love for the man.
Oh, they don't need affection for him. I just mean he is the guy that's going to keep the war going. He is the guy that is going to say, I'm going to, fight to the last thing up until the point where we can get our own military and we can fight this war that we're supposed to fight when we confront the Russians. Basically, Zelensky is the man who's willing to send Ukrainians to their death for a holding maneuver for Europe. That's
why this is not a regime change effort. It's a light rap on the knuckles.
Basically,
hey,
stop.
Get your hands off that.
Yeah, don't touch that.
This is no, as of yet, there is no sign that this is any type of real regime threat to Zelensky.
Fair enough.
There's no political alternative. There's no defection from within any of the things. There's no oligarch money flowing into it. There's no opposition, alternate figure to Zelensky taking charge and being promoted. There's none of that, right? This is just get your hands off that.
Okay.
That's as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
Fair enough.
But
Fair enough.
I could be wrong, right? And again, if I'm wrong, we will see further signs because some of those things that I talked about earlier will start to emerge, right? There will be defections from within the security services. There will be someone promoted as an alternative. There will be one of the political parties probably, behind that person selected to provide political impetus to, then whatever will take shape on the aftermath. Those are the things we'll see.
We also need to see these grow beyond AstroTurf.
Oh yeah. Beyond the, I've seen numbers of 40,000 in Kiev, which is not insignificant. It's easily the largest protests we've seen in the country since the beginning of the Russian intervention. But I would argue that it's most likely far larger than any protests we've seen in the country since 2014.
Yeah.
That seems likely. But they're not the same protests that we saw in 2013 and 2014. There is no muscle behind them. There is no street fighting against the police. There is no attempt to take control of government buildings, to form a permanent base camp, right, within Kiev. These are actual Western-style protesters that go out there. Now, you'll notice, for instance, that they're not all carrying uniform Western manufactured signs in English. However, they all are carrying uniform self-created signs of brown cardboard of a nearly uniform shape and size, right? Which means, right, we've learned that if we hand out pre-made signs and everything and t-shirts and everyone promoting the same color, that no one believes this shit anymore, right? So there's a deeper level of these are genuine protests here than before, even though they're still obviously not.
I want to move to I guess two things, and they're linked. One has to do with Ursula von der Leyen signing this agreement with Donald Trump that they're going to be investing, I think, $700 billion in LNG, $600 billion, almost as a vassal tribute to the United States of investment, 15%
another
tariff.
800 billion euros in the military industrial. They keep throwing around these fantastic sums of money that they have fantasies of within the structures of the EU, and I never
So you
see
think it's
any
fake too?
money. What?
Yeah, so you think it's fake also, like that this is Ursula von der Leyen
It's
saying,
all
yeah, whatever.
pie in the sky stuff. It's all pie in the sky stuff. I don't believe, whatever. If they ever manage to get anything in that direction, it will be a tiny fraction, 25% of the funds that they're talking about, which of course drastically reduces it. Now, we talked last week a bit about the Zangezur corridor, and there is a potential for new energy sources to be tapped there that the Europeans would be really hot for, because then they could get oil and gas shipped directly from Azerbaijan through Armenia then if that corridor was taken control of. But that would still be years down the road, right? That would not solve any immediate problems. But there is no solving their immediate problems, right? They have done this to themselves. The process of the deindustrializing of Europe has been self-inflicted, and it's ongoing. And when you have, the British companies and press acknowledging that energy prices there are 4 times what they were a few years ago, without anyone ever acknowledging why they are that much higher, that is a process of deindustrialization, because obviously companies can't compete when their energy costs are so high. They shut down. And that's the end. We're seeing this in the UK. We're seeing it to an even faster degree in Germany, and where those two largest economies in that scale of that type go in Europe, of course, the rest of Europe follows down that spiral. So
yeah, I call this Trump killed Europe. That's the way I called it. And
I don't call it Trump. Why Trump killed Europe? I see it.
US. I'm pointing out that this trade deal, if indeed they try to accomplish the objectives of this trade deal, is a death knell for Europe. Like there's no way that companies could.
That's just Trump coming up and kicking the European corpse when it's already shot him, right? That's just him coming up and saying, and kicking it for good measure while it's down. It did this to itself. Viktor Orban said, these sanctions that we've put on Russia are not so much us shooting ourselves in the foot as us shooting ourselves in the lung. This is self-inflicted suicide. Trump is just seeing the suicide victim bleeding out on the ground and coming up and giving it a good whack, a good kick in the face while it's down. Just out of spite. Just out of spite.
Just because he could. There's another thing that came out. Richard Grenell, the Washington ambassador for Germany, has apparently created a huge amount of controversy in an interview that he did with what is called FNA. And he pointed out, right here, there was a communique that was put out. I'm pretty sure you've seen this. And he enacts or invokes the potential enemies clause in the UN declaration. And he says, effectively, Germany must no longer live in this illusion of sovereignty. Like, I know you guys thought you were sovereign. No, you're not. And if we need to put 200,000 American troops in Germany, we will do that. And when we tell you that you need to increase the amount that you spend for defense and everything else, you need to do that. That's not us asking you, that's telling you. And if we need to invoke the enemies clause in the United Nations, we will also do that. That is
because I'm sure that Russia and China are going to agree to that in the United Nations.
But that's the other interesting part, right? Because apparently any nation, like Russia could do it. Russia could be like, hey, we're going to invoke the enemies clause. You guys are no longer, if we need to get in, we need to get in. Nobody's going to accept that.
No one's going to accept that in the modern day, right? I mean, that is really just the Trump people finding an interesting a lingering historical and legal footnote that no one can really act upon in the modern world. And I mean, international law only exists when the majority of concerned great powers acknowledge that it exists because it's in their interest to do so. So if say that Russia, invoked this on one side or the US invoked it on the other, neither side would agree and recognize this, and it would just be a unilateral move by one side or the other against Germany, which is unlikely. So I think this is just, an interesting historical footnote with still a legal technicality that really amounts to little more than smack talking about Germany to know your place.
Yeah, but you really think Germany... See, I think these guys are such vassals that they would even accept it.
Sure. I mean, you mean they might just roll over? Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, whatever the U.S. really pushes for, Germany will do. I have no doubts about that. There is no, I mean, after Nord Stream, right, and everything we've seen since, there is no amount of kowtowing, no amount of obeisance that quite obviously Germany and the other Europeans won't resort to before the U.S. I mean, Mark Rutte is the former leader of Denmark rather than, say, Germany. But, I mean, the level of sycophancy that he has risen. This is
called a grown man.
In the first administration, the first Trump administration, there was a significant deterioration, not quite a rupture, but a significant deterioration in the Euro-Atlantic relationship, the relationship between the U.S. and Europe. They don't like Trump. Trump doesn't like them. They campaigned against him. He acted against them out of spite when he was in office. And there were countless articles talking about the problems that arise between Europe and America. Then Joe Biden came in, and then it was the Europeans all, oh, our hegemonic master is back in his proper form, right? And they love Biden. There was no significant problems for years. They just did whatever he said, right? Because they basically agreed with it, more or less. But now with Trump back, rather than risk further deterioration of that Euro-Atlantic relationship, leading to an actual rupture, like say what some people had the fear that NATO itself would come undone. I've never adhered to that. I've never actually believed that was a likely outcome. But we can talk about damage done, right? And their answer to that is just to roll over and show their belly and act with complete sycophancy and obeisance to Trump to prevent that from happening. And obviously their front man for that is Mark Rutte, right? I mean, daddy,
oh man, daddy, yeah.
And even when he completely disagrees with Trump, right? Trump says, "Oh, Ukraine's never going to be in NATO." Yeah. And Mark Rutte sitting next to him will nod his head, and then the next time Mark Rutte's in public back in Europe, right? He'll quietly say that European, it's inevitable that Ukraine will join NATO someday and everything. Right. It's all about showing the proper obeisance, particularly within the physical presence, the court of the would-be God Emperor of mankind, Donald Trump. So that's their stratagem. And so far it's worked, but we're only a few months in. And the latest sign of this is this tariffs, right? It was going to be 30%, right? They rolled over and showed their belly. And as Trump said, not my words, they came to kiss my ass, right? And he was quite proud of that. Well, the Europeans came and they agreed behind closed doors to this 15%, evidently, and we'll see how it goes from there. But once again, they showed their belly. And once they did, once they showed their submission to Trump, he let up a little bit. That's the way he acts. That's the way what he expects from every other country to do to him, right? Of course, that's not what Russia does to him. But even Russia, Putin at least still plays the game of, shall we say, buttering him up, even as they say no.
Yeah.
They do. Yeah. They're still holding out hope, right? They play a different game, right? Putin is the good cop who plays nice, while Medvedev goes off on all of this as Putin's anger management translator on social media, right? That's where they are.
Glenn Deason pointed out that Europe had two choices in regards to where they could go. They could stand up and say, we're looking out to the rest of the world. We're going to make the best choices for Europe. So if that's Russia or China, fair enough, that's what we're going to do. Or they can remain obsequious to the US and in that obsequience effectively destroy any notion of European power in regards to the world. They can make themselves irrelevant. And it seems they've chosen.
Yeah, of course.
That's what they've chosen, which is pretty wild. When you think about it, they don't know that, though. I mean, they don't have economists, professors, people who would look at the situation and say, hey, this is not in our best interest. Is it purely ideological? My
theory is that this generation of European elite, right? And since obviously, if you go back and think of Jacques Chirac, right, and that generation, right, and Schroeder in Germany, we've seen a complete political and ideological changing of the guard within these European political parties themselves. And my theory is that they have the European foreign policy elite now, for the most part, across the board. Again, you've got holdouts in Hungary and Slovakia, in Spain to a certain degree, but these are, in the scale, relatively unimportant countries when it comes to Europe. What we've seen is the mental colonization of Europe by American neocons. First, they took over the United States, right? even as they emerged out of the George W. Bush administration and somehow bipartisanly took control of the entirety of U.S. Foreign policy, right? They also spread out across the Atlantic. And I can't tell you the number of European officials I've heard quoting Robert Kagan, right? The head, the arch neocon, the husband of Victoria Nuland, right? When Joseph Borrell, the last EU foreign policy high muckety muck, was going off about the garden and the jungle and all of this, he was quoting book titles of Robert Kagan, right? And I've heard them quote Robert Kagan by name in Austria, officials in there. So I believe that this generation has fully bought into the idea of Western exceptionalism, right? Not just American exceptionalism, but Western exceptionalism, right? That Europe should know its place within U.S. hegemony, right? But within that, they believe that the West is
superior,
societally, structurally, and above all, morally superior to every other culture, country, and civilization on the earth. And therefore, they not only have the right, but the duty to enforce that on the world through U.S.-led Western global hegemony. And I would draw a historical parallel to what the role that the Greeks found for themselves within the Roman Empire, right? They were effectively conquered when they stood up. They didn't always stand up against the expansion of the Roman Empire, but the Roman Empire was still largely informed by Greek ideas, cultures, religion, and the like. And so the Greeks found a role for themselves as the favored house slaves of the Romans, right? They were brought in to educate Roman children, and their culture still was what Rome, up until the conversion to Christianity, carried forward, right? And so it was through Rome, through Greece, that Rome then expanded into Asia Minor, and the rest of the world to the east. So that's what the Europeans are today. They are the Greeks to the modern Roman Empire that is U.S. hegemony.
Europe doesn't inform us on anything. We don't even respect. Europe will be fed to the Russians and used as vassals or used as cannon fodder every bit as much as the Ukrainians are being used now. They don't know.
What language are you speaking?
I'm speaking American English, Mark.
You're speaking English, the language, a European language. Right? The Christianity that Americans hold as the dominant religion with the country is a religion that they brought over with them from Europe, right?
Yes.
When the institutions of the U.S. government bear an interesting architectural resemblance to certain Greek temples and Roman pantheons, there is a specific reason for that, because everything that America is just an evolution, even if a bit of a distortion, of Europe.
Fair enough. I accept that. I'm just saying the Europeans today, we don't look to Europe today for this stuff.
This is why Russia has no fear of the Europeans. They fear the Americans, right? They don't fear the self-organization, the military power, the economic power of the Europeans. And even if you want to say they don't fear the Americans, they have a healthy respect, right, for the other nuclear superpower in the world. They're not afraid of German troops in Latvia and Estonia. They are concerned about American troops there or in Finland or somewhere else, right? Yeah. That is the reality of it. But the Europeans also understand that. So,
last question, Kaliningrad. I have to hit that before I go. Every accusation is a confession. I've said that more than once. this talk about 2027, China is going to take Taiwan, Russia is going to invade NATO, and it's going to happen in 2027. Okay, every accusation is a confession. That is my prevailing hypothesis on this stuff. Do you think, and of course there was the military general who said something to the effect that we can invade Kaliningrad before Russia can respond to the fact that we can invade Kaliningrad, we can do it by land, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
And show all of these charts or whatever. Is that something?
How many tactical nukes does that general want parked in his backyard?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because that's what Russia's effectively said, that if you try to take our territory, we will strike. Like
whatever is necessary, right?
Yes.
First of all, I don't believe they could conventionally take Kaliningrad within, the scope that they're talking, right? Certainly not without Russian forces overrunning all of the Baltics before they successfully take over Kaliningrad, right?
Yeah.
But if the Americans were landing hundreds of thousands of troops, right, to back the Europeans up, then Russia would use nukes to defend their territory. Yes, they would, right? Absolutely. I don't see still much action on this, but there is a current line of thinking within, shall we say, the European elite and the American, blob that is still largely in line with them, that okay, they're losing this war now, but it is just part of a larger war. And we can keep Ukraine fighting and dying for another few years until we're ready to fight Russia ourselves, right? 2027, 2028, 2030, whatever it is. They think they can keep Ukraine on life support until then. And then that is when they all talk, right? How many European leaders? We will be at war with Russia in a few years. Now, that war is not going to be what they say it is. Russia's not going to invade Poland or Lithuania or any Baltics country or anything themselves. Where this is going, and I don't believe that they're going to just out of the blue invade Kaliningrad either. They're going to put troops in Ukraine, in whatever's left of Ukraine, west of the Dnieper, in Galicia, Odessa, right, Lvov, or potentially within Moldova, right? Or there will be another attempt to overthrow the government in Belarus, although that's an outside possibility at this point. But then they'll be putting forces in to back their chosen president for Belarus, Tikhanovskaya, or whoever. That is where the potential for conflict is. It's still the gray areas that exist between the last buffer zones between Russia and NATO, right? Even particularly because NATO is pissing all over them, claiming it as NATO geopolitical territory. We heard the last NATO Secretary General, Jens Stoltenberg, repeatedly claim there are no gray zones anymore. There are no more neutral countries. That's not acceptable to them, right? All the neutral countries, Finland, Sweden, there's now a push to bring Austria into NATO. And of course, they mean the same thing for Moldova and Ukraine and Belarus and Georgia. And I don't know, maybe even Armenia, right? They will surround Russia. That's the goal. That's the Rand Corporation's pressure cooker strategy, right? I mean, to a T. That is where the conflict will break out. Now, of course, it won't just stop there, but I think they're still looking that they can keep Russia, at the wolf's door in Ukraine for another 2 or 3 years, and then they can move troops in at the end to defend Kiev or Lvov or whatever it is. And that's where the real danger of that war breaks out. Now, that concerns me a great deal. And by then, Joe Biden may be gone, right? That's the idea, or the hope, or more firmly under control or whatever. But where I still take some, I still regard this as fantasy and smack talking to a degree, because I see no organized rebuilding of a unified European military industrial complex, or the rebuilding of the military itself in Europe in manpower terms, right? Their militaries are deteriorated to such a point where Russia's not afraid of them anymore, right? They will have to bring in large amounts of new people into the military, whether through drafts, as Germans keep talking about but haven't enacted so far, right? Other countries, Sweden restarted the draft, but you'll need to see a lot more of that. They'll need to build up powerful officer corps, right? A professional military class. I just don't see any of that happening. And until then, they may have fantasies that they're able to militarily confront Russia in Ukraine or Moldova or wherever, but they're not. And Russia understands that. So at the moment, it is still ideational rather than a organized plan. But the very fact that some of them, and some very powerful ones, are thinking of it and trying to move things in that direction should be terrifying, right? Because that's what
it's 2027 when they think the military of Ukraine is going to collapse, and that's why this keeps coming up. Like
that's a number that they've fixated on recently. I've seen other ones put it off till 2030, mentioned, but yeah, in the last couple of weeks, 2027 has popped up a couple of times. But again, they've been talking about this for half a year or more now, right?
Yeah. When I saw the Kaliningrad thing, that's where it piques my interest. Where it's like,
yeah, of course. I mean, Russians immediately, that's NATO talking about taking over Russian territory, right? I mean, of course, it draws not only attention from the Kremlin, but it draws attention from the Russian media and the Russian public as well.
Mark, you are fantastic, as always. Mark Sleboda, International Relations Security Analyst. You can find Mark on Boosty, Boosty. You can put in Realpolitik, Mark Sleboda, or just Mark Sleboda. His name will come up. Check him out. Support his content. Support his work. Mark has been fantastic. He's a great friend of the show. You have my deepest appreciation, Mark. By the way, also on Twitter at Mark Sleboda1. You can check him out. Have a good one, Mark. Thank you for this.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Mark Sleboda is fantastic. Mark Sleboda is fantastic. Man, he knows his stuff. Mark Sleboda is fantastic. I don't have anything else to say about that. Let's go to a chat first before bringing in Ted. USA is Monty Python's Black Knight, missing all the limbs, still provoking fights. Yeah, but that's a $1 trillion military. And they may, let's say, run low on weapons. They may run low on missiles. They may be incompetent in regards to their leadership. But it is a man-child sociopath with a gun and can cause a lot of difficulty and problems around the world. And my argument would be that it is causing fires all across the globe. That is my argument. I stand by that. I stand by that. By the way, you can always support the content. PayPal, Patreon, Super Chat, Super Stickers, all of those things help the show propagate itself and keeps the show moving. I am strongly considering a fundraiser on my birthday. That birthday will be on Sunday. And I've asked a few guests so far about whether or not they will be open to joining me on Sunday. See, it's always hard to do stuff like that. It's not the work. It's more so that the moment that you use a guest, it is hard to double up on that guest for the week. And if you were bringing in a lot of guests on Sunday, trying to get them back for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, it's somewhat of a chore. They would have to voluntarily say, yes, I'm willing to double up and come on your show twice. That's the issue. But we'll see. It's something that I want to do. I think it would raise a lot of revenue for the channel. And I just think it would be a nice thing for the audience. I wonder if I could do calls on that day too. I don't know. It would be great to do all of those things. I'm not a white boy. What? I'm a white boy, not a brother. Still think of Jamal as brother. I don't care about your race. I don't think I care about anybody's race, to be honest. There's that. Ted Rall is going to be here in a few minutes. We are going to hit. There is a weird phenomena in the Democratic Party where they've decided, okay, we have to say something about Israel. They're starving millions of people, including children. You have skeletal kids walking around, the kids literally dropping dead. That looks bad. We've backed Israel to the hilt, politically, financially, etc. We have ignored a genocide that has taken place and paid for that genocide, by the way, with taxpayer dollars of the United States. So we now need to say something about that. So Hakeem Jeffries, the same guy who came out saying this, and just so we're very clear on what we're talking about here, right here, starving people. I want you to see it. It looks like the fifth chamber of hell. This is what the Democratic Party has created. Let that sink in, by the way. It's not conceptual. People are living. You have people literally dropping dead from starvation. Dropping dead from starvation. Hakeem Jeffries puts out a statement. During the first 6 months of Donald Trump's time in office, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza has reached a breaking point. Hostages are still being held with Hamas, despite the president's promise that they will be released. And pre-existing ceasefire the administration inherited has been breached. It wasn't inherited, but let's keep going. The starvation and death of Palestinian children and civilians in the ongoing war zone is unacceptable. The Trump administration has the ability to bring an end to this humanitarian crisis. They must act now. Guess who they haven't mentioned at all in that statement so far? Israel. He hasn't mentioned Israel at all. Let's keep going. It is imperative for the humanitarian aid to be surged into Gaza immediately, the remaining Israeli hostages to be released, and a ceasefire negotiated by the Biden administration restored. Again, that was Witkoff that negotiated that, but let's keep going. We need a just and lasting peace, ultimately, that will occur through a two-state solution that facilitates a state and secure Israeli living side by side with the Palestinian state and provides dignity, self-determination, and prosperity for its people. That's the only time he mentioned Israel in the entire speech or statement. Same Hakeem Jeffries that was saying this a few months ago. Jesus Christ, where is it? Where is it? Oh, I see what's going on. Same Hakeem Jeffries. They gave the speech.
And then you had to deal with the first intifada, and Israel prevailed. And Israel had to deal with the second intifada, and Israel prevailed. And then missiles were flying in December of 2008, and Israel prevailed. And then missiles were flying in November of 2012, and Israel prevailed. And so I'm confident that when it's all said and done, we're going to stand together. Israel today, Israel tomorrow, Israel forever. God.
Same guy. Same guy. Hakeem Jeffries is not alone in this. Barack Obama, Cory Booker, all of them have been putting out these mealy-mouthed statements that can't call a genocide because what they realize is, oh my God, you have kids that are walking around in skeletal fashion that are falling and dropping dead from starvation because the Israeli government is committing a genocide, and we've backed and supported that genocide. And even in these statements, cannot point out this is what we are paying for, and this is what Israel is doing. AOC, same thing. This is your Democratic Party. This is your Democratic Party. I want to bring in Ted Rall. Ted Rall is a political cartoonist, syndicated columnist, host of TMI with the beautiful, the one and only, the great Manila Chan. Ted, welcome to the show, my man. How you doing this morning? You doing okay?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Have you noticed these speeches coming out of the Democratic Party? It's almost like they've realized, oh my God, we've backed, supported, and paid for a genocide. We have skeletal kids that are walking around that are dropping dead. And so we need to say something about it. And whether it's Barack Obama, whether it's Cory Booker, whether it's, again, charisma of a damp rag, Hakeem Jeffries, they can't call a spade because of the political associations to which they've associated themselves with. And yet They're pulling this Joe Biden nonsense of I'm working tirelessly for a ceasefire when you realize Joe Biden wasn't working tirelessly for anything. These people support this genocide, just like the Europeans support this genocide. I don't care what they say. I care what they do. And in the context of even these mealy-mouthed statements is a statement below the statement to which they're making. And that statement is, we can't say anything strong against the people who back us. Give me your take on this. Did you disagree with that?
Well, it's hard for me not to be even more cynical than usual with based on what you just described. But I'm what's clear here, and what's been clear for a long time.
Ted, can you put up your mic just a little bit?
Oh, okay, sure. Let's do this. All right, let's touch a settings button to make sure it's working right. Okay, how's that?
Perfect.
Is that better?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, cool. All right, so, I mean, basically what happens here, I think, is, in the case of Hakeem Jeffries, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, anyone, I don't really know that they actually foundationally believe in or against anything at all. I think that it's, they're about as bound to their positions as someone who's a hedge fund, a trader, a stock trader is to a particular stock. They place bets, right? So, 40 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, betting on the side of Israel over Palestine probably was a pretty good bet. You would get more, obviously the Palestinians didn't have much money to donate to your campaign. AIPAC and the Israel lobby did. It was safer. You would have interference run for you in corporate-owned newspapers who were also pro-Zionist, and it just seemed like it would work out. And really, pretty much since 1948 until I would say maybe about a year ago, being pro-Israel was the safe bet, and it paid. It literally paid. Now, it's these guys are looking at it like a stock trader, and they're like, man, I don't know if Israel is a hold anymore, and it might be a sell. And it's like, but what do I do? Because I went long in this position. I gave speeches like the one that you just broadcast. I have all these statements in my past, and these days with the internet, everything lives forever. So, what do I do? How do I backpedal? I know that I'm going to get my ass kicked now in my market position, in my ideological position, which are the same thing, because I bet wrong. There's part of the reason that people like you and I admired Bernie Sanders was because he believed, whether you agree with him or not, this is a guy who always believed what he believed. And he believed it when it was unpopular, when he was marginalized, when he was made fun of, when it harmed him, when it kept him out of power. That's called integrity. Integrity is doing what you think is right, even when it harms you. Now, most politicians, of course, don't know what integrity is and don't have integrity. It's not part of their job. And so, people like Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, they all know better. They just don't care. And so basically they've been on Team Israel because that was the winning team. Now it's like, oh boy, we have 160 countries out of 197 that are recognizing Palestine as a state. France, big game changer. I said it last week. That's a huge thing. France coming on board. Now, Keir Starmer's getting pressure today from Britons saying, we want the UK to recognize Palestine. I mean, will he do it? Maybe, probably not. But it's not definitely not, is it? And so the fact that it's not definitely not is a major change there. So the point is, these guys, they have to walk it back. Now, it's embarrassing to listen to them say things like, we need a two-state solution. I'd like to welcome you to 1974. I mean, it's like that ship sailed, left, sunk to the bottom of the sea, rotted, is now a reef at the bottom of the sea. It's done. Nobody wants it. Most of all, Israel doesn't want it, but the Palestinians don't want it. And you can plainly see it will not work. I was, back in the 80s, I thought that was a good idea too. when I visited Israel and the West Bank a week before the Second Intifada, and right before all hell broke loose, right? And the thing is, at the time, you could really see, oh, these two countries, they're economically codependent. They're going to work with each other. They're going to have to. They're neighbors. I walked around the old city of Jerusalem, and there were Israeli police officers training their Palestinian Authority counterparts one-on-one, and sitting around smoking and joking, and it was like, oh, I can see the future here. Well, that had about a week to go, and that was it, never to be seen again, right? And so reality is really biting these guys in the ass. And I mean, I'd be laughing about it, and I am laughing about it, except for the fact that we're talking about, genocide. So it's not really a laughing matter.
Yeah, that's fair.
Oh,
basically, they're immoral.
You're muted.
No, can you guys hear me?
Or you know what? That's me. I got it. I'll take care of it.
Oh, okay.
I got it.
Yeah. Personally, I think they're immoral. I agree with you that they don't believe in anything. It's what is in my political advantage in the moment. And in this case, they're like, all right, it's in our political advantage to give lip service to something that but see, I think that's the difference. I think they do believe in it. I think they're just immoral. I think they look at Israel and they look at it as it's our colony. It's a European colony. We have 800,000 Americans that are living there. And that is our military base in the Middle East. And we may not have morals in the sense of this right or wrong stuff, but in geopolitical interests, it serves our geopolitical interests. And so we will give lip service. We're protected. We will go to the ICJ and make the argument that Israel has the right to starve 2 million people or 8 million people. Or 2 million people, I should say. Meaning, I do think they believe in it. I think they believe in it in a geopolitical sense. I think these guys are neocons. I think they are immoral. I think evil is a good word for it. I think Tucker Carlson uses that word. I think that we're legit for it. And so if it takes starving 2 million people, then that's what they do. If it takes defending that, that's what they do. When they see that the public has turned against them on it, they would give lip service to it, just like Joe Biden did, where Joe Biden would come back and say, hey, I think this is horrible. I think this is bad. We're fighting tirelessly for a two-state solution. That was nonsense. He wasn't doing it. Explicitly not. Israel even came out and said, thank God Joe Biden was in office. God put Joe Biden in office because Joe Biden didn't pressure us on anything. So I think they do care because it's not just meaning this is not ethereal, right? This is not conceptual. There is a physical matter reality war for land that Israel wants to take that just so happened to the misfortune of the Palestinians that they were living there first. That the U.S. has decided this gives us a pivot point in the Middle East for us to be able to project power through the Middle East, through our colony. So I agree with you that they have no morals, but I disagree in the sense that there is something physical on the ground that that colony of squatters allows them to effect, and that's to project power. Just like NATO, right? NATO is a power projection device in Europe. Israel is a power projection device in the Middle East.
Well,
that's kind of the way it's it.
I mean, look, you're right about that. But I think I think it depends on each politician that we're talking about, right? Who are we talking about? I mean, so certainly the point of view you're articulating is a neocon, and I'm going to give those people credit, not something I normally do. They have an ideological foundation that basically says America first in a sort of imperialistic way, and
Yes.
and like Imperial Rome, we will exploit the provinces and bring the wealth back to us, but not really to the people here, but just to the elites. But it is a coherent, cohesive ideology, which is this is about material, political, ideological, and cultural extraction from
Ted,
foreign
sorry,
countries.
God said, I'm so sorry to interrupt. They're still complaining that your volume is too low.
Huh.
They're screaming at me over and over again. Ted,
they
we can't
really?
hear you. Ted, we can't hear you.
don't know what to do. I mean,
Is
I
there
can
a
be closer.
volume button at the
Yeah.
bottom of your computer?
Yeah,
If you
it's, let's
click
see.
on it and you see the mic part, if you move that up just a little bit,
Okay, I just did that. Is that any good? Is that better?
a little bit more.
Okay, there, right there.
Okay.
That's all I got.
Okay, let's go with what you got. I'm sorry, please continue. I'm sorry to interrupt you. They were like screaming, Ted can't hear him.
Okay,
Still
all right. I'll be as close to the mic as possible. All right,
Okay.
but basically, it's an ideology. They have a cohesive ideology. Now, Hakeem Jeffries, okay, he's from Crown Heights, Brooklyn. Okay, he went to NYU Law School. He's a New Yorker. I find it extremely difficult to believe that Hakeem Jeffries, as a young man, was staying up late at night thinking, Israel now, Israel forever. I don't believe that. I think that when he got into the Democratic Party establishment and decided to become a politician, that he was told, you have to do this in order to be part of our club. That's what I think. And I think that, and then like maybe with someone like Chuck Schumer, okay, he's Jewish. So maybe that comes in baked naturally. But I think it really depends. I don't think Barack Obama woke up, in Chicago one morning and said, God, Israel's awesome. And I'll back them up no matter what they do. So, I mean, I think it depends. And I think you're right that certainly that's the way like the imperialist theorists view Israel. No question about it. But I think most of the other ones are going along. Then there's a lot of people who go along out of fear, right? And maybe Hakeem Jeffries is one of them. I mean, I have to admit, for many, many years, I was hesitant to ever do cartoons criticizing Israel. I still did. I said I was hesitant, but I did it. Because you have to. You're afraid of something, but you do it anyway. But I knew that every time I did it, I'd be accused of being an anti-Semite, which is gross, and you don't want to be accused of being an anti-Semite. So, therefore, I think it's important to understand that there's a lot of things here. This is a fascinating moment because basically what we're witnessing is one of those historical moments when the spell is about to break and everyone's going to get real, and then it's going to go the other way around. I mean, Israel is going to be a pariah state. There's no question about it. There's no coming back now. And even if Netanyahu were replaced by a liberal regime in Israel, which I don't see happening, again, it just wouldn't. It's over. It's like basically U.S. unvarnished global support for Israel is finished. The U.S. will be the last friend of Israel, and even that's not going to last forever. I mean, it's going to be an apartheid state. I mean, it is an apartheid state. It's going to be a pariah state forever and ever. And they're going to collapse because it's a welfare state. They get all of their money from us. We run interference for their bullshit in the UN Security Council. We give them, intel support where we cooperate with the Mossad. They can't live without us. They can't. A little bird can't fly free. You go there and you can see why. Because it's Vegas. Like Vegas couldn't live on its own. It has to get water piped in from other places. It has to have electricity piped in from other places. Food brought in from nothing grows there. It's Vegas. There's nothing there. It's just rocks and sand. So, like, everything's piped in.
No, that's a good point. And I've heard a lot of people say that. It's going to collapse. It's going to collapse. It's going to fall. There's no way it can keep going. It's a pariah state. Yeah. I mean, we may be the last man supporting a pariah state. But at some point, there will be a political leader. And he would say, we're done with this. I mean, we're talking about 20-year-olds who are angry, pissed off that we're effectively supporting the state. So you might be right. You might be entirely right.
Yeah, and we are. And people, like one of the ADL, they have this ridiculous definition of anti-Zionism being the same as anti-Semitism. And one of their interesting that we don't talk about this much on the left, but we should. They say attacking Israel for doing things that other countries do, but specifically attacking them, like treating them differently, right? It's like, okay, well, there is a difference when your country is paying for it. Okay, so if Myanmar oppresses the Rohingya, that's atrocious and obviously should be condemned. but we're not paying the Myanmar government at all. We're not so it's not. We have no responsibility. Our hands are clean, like Pontius Pilate, all gone. It's like, but that's not true. Israel is the #1 U.S. ally, #1 recipient of U.S. military, foreign, and aid and assistance and financial assistance. So that's different. I mean, it's all the difference in the world.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. I've had this argument with people from Africa where they would say, well, you don't care about the Congo. And it's like, dude, I'm not paying for the Congo. Like, I'm not paying 70 to 80% of the killing, the murders, everything else that is taking place. I have a special interest in this because we are paying for it. No, I agree with you 1,000%.
I mean, like, look, I care about the Congo. It's just that, in the hierarchy of priorities, it's just not the top priority for an American activist.
I want to play a clip for you by Chris Matthews. I am...
Who once hit on my wife.
I'm fascinated by this clip because Chris Matthews doesn't seem to understand that it is not a dichotomy. Like, meaning it's not zero-sum. It's not one or the other. Either you love and hate Trump or you love and hate the Democrats, and that you can't do them both equally. That you can say, I hate both. Yeah. Both are trash. Both are horrible. Because he's looking at the polling and he's showing, okay, well, Donald Trump is getting trashed in the polling. He's dropping significantly in the way that people are seeing him on issue after issue after issue. And he's saying, yeah, but...
And by the way, Jamal, just you wait this week. This week, all hell's going to break loose in New York City, I think, with the ice flooding the zone and the protests are starting. That's going to tank. That's going to not help him on deportations either.
Which makes my point, right? Like, Eric Adams is allowing that, from my understanding. Correct?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, he totally is. He in exchange for not enforcing New York City's sanctuary city law, he got all of his charges dismissed, his corruption charges dismissed against him. And then he's getting sued anyway by the DOJ, by Trump.
Is he?
Yeah,
I didn't realize he was getting sued.
Trump's suing him and the city of New York for having a sanctuary law. So it's not enough. This is the thing about Trump. You give him an inch, he takes a mile. It's like, okay, I won't enforce the law. Okay, thank you. That's not good enough. Now get rid of the law.
This is Chris Matthews. Chris Matthews, that's amazing. Chris Matthews is befuddled. And I want to get your take on this clip. Let me pull it up.
And he's got it. To be honest with you, the country is moving towards Trump. These polls that come out and show him not doing well, I don't buy that. I think his strength is still greater than the Democrats' strength. He is a stronger public figure than the Democratic people. I mean, Obama still has tremendous charisma, but Trump has strength. And I think that's what all voters look for. But they wanted a president who is a strong figure. And he's got it. And he can, it's just there. And half the country buys it. That's what I think.
So he is thinking, okay, Ted, I know I actually turned your mic up. Could you turn it down just a little bit? There's a static that's coming through. Jesus, I'm so sorry.
You know what it is? I'm going to turn it off. It's my fan. I'm dying here. We're in week 5 of a heat wave here. I'm going to turn it down.
Are you? No, I don't want you to turn your fan off. I don't want you to suffer. Ted is in his underwear. I don't want you to suffer. No, I don't want you to suffer.
That's going to help.
Okay, I don't want you to suffer.
That's all right.
Give me your take on that. I mean, he seemed to be stuck in this political dichotomy of Trump is strong. I think the Democrats are getting it wrong. I think he's stronger than the Democrats. Okay, you can be, let's say, on a scale of 100, 35, and the other guy is at 20. That means both of you are hated.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's obviously the situation, right? I mean, we already know, and the establishment just won't accept this reality, right? But basically, there are 3 major political parties in the United States: the D's, the R's, and the non-voters.
Yes.
And the non-voters are not. We've long thought. Well, I haven't thought this, but the take has always been These are lazy, stupid people who can't be bothered to get off their asses and go and exercise their patriotic franchise that men and women of the armed forces lived and died for. No, that's not the case. They're not voting for the D's and the R's because they don't like the D's and the R's. Probably there's some lazy shits in there too, but mostly it's people who hate the D's and the R's. And some of those people, they like, okay, I'm going to go cast a protest vote that I know will amount to nothing for the Greens or the Libertarians or whoever, but they don't vote. Now we've proven that can change. Bernie Sanders brought a lot of those people along. Donald Trump brought a lot of those people into the GOP and took over the GOP with those people. So we know they exist. We know they'll vote if properly motivated, but still the pretense is, it's a zero-sum game. A win for the Republicans is a loss for the Democrats, and vice versa. Not necessarily. I mean, look, Donald Trump has his position on deportations and immigration, which should have been his strength, really, truly, it's all interesting here, right? Because people do favor that point of view. They don't like the execution. They want the deportations. Like if Trump really had prioritized, bad hombres, people who have committed serious crimes, rapists, murderers, and so on, nobody, including me, would really have much of a problem with that. Like, bye. But like he didn't do that, and so the execution has been foul because Trump isn't really like a manager, right? He's not, and so he didn't tell them like, listen, how you do it is as important as what you do. So he's getting eaten alive in the polls. But like, look at immigration on its own. That doesn't mean that people want to go back to the Biden era of open borders and whoever wants to come here can show up. It doesn't mean the Democrats have established a narrative at all, much less one that's popular with the public. On immigration, Democrats are still not getting the advantage because they haven't proffered on this and really every other issue. They haven't proffered an alternative at all, much less one that's popular, right? They haven't said like, if we were in, we would do X, Y, Z. Mm-hmm. So, and that X, Y, Z would need to be, to catch fire with the public, but they haven't articulated it. And I guess they just they're waiting for Trump to just fuck up. So far, Trump has really mainly fucked up from Epstein. Yes. But it's not enough to get the Democrats where they need to be. Not to mention, man, Trump's people are too clever by half. Like, we were going to lose the House next year. We'll sleaze around in Texas and do some redistricting and get 5 seats that way. Maybe that'll keep control of the House. And it might work, probably will work. So it's just, you're right. I mean, the Democrats are in real trouble, and they do have to have their own. You are a major political party. You were founded in 1824 by Andrew Jackson. You should know, from 200 years of history, you have to have your own platform, and you have to articulate that platform and sell it to the people. They seem to think they don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah, it's weird. It's very weird. I mean, part of it is you don't represent things for anything, so nobody cares. And that they believe, I think they've gotten so wrapped up in Trump that it's almost like they crossed the hurdle. Like the ability to articulate this will be what we do. And once you go so long without believing in anything, it's kind of hard.
Jamal, it's my turn to complain about your sound. You're a little bit wobbly.
I'm wobbly. Oh, hold on. One second. Okay, I'm going to put this on auto, and I'm going to do this. Okay.
That's better.
If you are a political party that has gone so long without representing anything, and in the context of not representing anything, a man like Trump comes along, and you lay it all on the line where your entire beingness is about Donald Trump, and then you lose. And, it's like going back to, hey, we need to represent something. We need to believe in something. We need to push for something. Okay, well, that's hard, especially considering.
Yeah, so much work.
Yeah, that's so much work. And we get so much money not to do that. It's better for us to be amoral, empty vessels. Yeah, but you can't get elected like that.
Yeah, not more than once or twice. Yeah, I mean, there's two main flaws with the Democratic strategy. First of all, is when you make your entire ideology about your strategies all about opposition to someone or something else, you empower that something else, because you're essentially, all publicity is good publicity, and you're doing publicity for your enemy. You're helping him, when literally Donald Trump just wants you to talk about Donald Trump. Well, if the Democrats are talking about Donald Trump too, he's like, yeah, like that's his biggest problem, is when people aren't talking about him and you're just feeding into him, right? He's like that episode of original Star Trek series with the hate monster, right? You're feeding into it, right? But also, the other problem is like, it's kind of like, okay, but what are you doing? Are you fighting back? Do you have a history of fighting back? The Democrats always compare Trump to Hitler, right? Well, how did Hitler win in 1937 after a bunch of elections where he slowly built up to a plurality that brought him to power in 1933? Well, the mainstream parliamentary parties were perceived as not having fought hard enough for the interest of the average German worker. And this was true for the bourgeois conservative parties, as well as the SPD and the KPD, the communist and the socialist parties. And so they weren't militant enough, right? And so we were that was a time of economic crisis, and that led to polarization and extremism. And so there was really, it was time for Hitler's opposition to oppose an extremist with extremist policies from the left that would have countered the extremist right-wing policies. Here, again, it's that time. We hear ridiculous talk like Democrats need to move to the center. Well, I mean, they're already a center-right party, but I don't know. But that's not going to work. It might work like during Clintonism worked during the mid-90s because it was the biggest economic expansion in U.S. history. People generally felt better each year than they had felt the year before, between 1992 and 2000. That is not true now. And people have been feeling worse and worse and worse, really ever since Bill Clinton left office. And they're pissed off. So they're looking for, I always say, extreme problems require extreme solutions. We have extreme problems, massive income disparity, etc. And the American people are looking for a party that's not going to say, like, if you're like $1 short, the Democrats are saying, hey, how about a dime? It's like, well, that's not going to work. Republicans are like, they're just all over the place and flailing. They would be exposed. They would be a permanent minority party. The Democrats got their act together. Now, but it could happen. I mean, it's the history of the Republic is long, but it doesn't appear to be imminent because no one's in charge of the ship. It's rudderless.
I want to go back to New York for a moment. You're pointing out that New York is going to effectively explode this week.
Probably. I mean, nobody knows, but I mean, it's a long, hot summer. I mean, it's been 5 weeks. Temperatures in the 90s, humid every day, like real feel like 109 a couple days ago. I mean, and people are surly after 3-4 years post-COVID, and nothing's really reopened. All the stores are closed. Things are scuzzy. Things are scuzzy and skeevy. The rents keep going up. So people are surly. They're in a bad mood. And now ICE is coming. You remember that line from, Humphrey Bogart's character in Casablanca in 1942, where he's talking to the Nazi officer, and he says, Major, there are some parts of New York City I would advise you not to invade. And it's like, and that's still true, because those parts are the parts that ICE is going to go to. They're not coming to my neighborhood. I mean, we have plenty of immigrants in my neighborhood, but they're going to go out to Queens and Brooklyn and Staten Island and the Bronx, and they're going to go to minority neighborhoods, and they're going to scoop up everyone who's a little taupe, whether they're a U.S. citizen or not. And New Yorkers don't play. I mean, already activists are ready. They've been studying what the Angelenos have been doing, which is they have like basically community defenses there where, all sorts of people follow ICE around, like in their cars. They call and they tweet out like, oh, they're on this street. Now they're on that street. I mean, we're going to be doing that here too. Heads up to the Angelinos, you guys rock, and we're going to be doing that here too. And it's going to be, there's going to be violence because we don't want to see our friends and our neighbors and our colleagues dragged off kicking and screaming into the night.
Had they put out signs for protests, put out messages, those type of things?
Oh yeah. No, there's protests beginning. The protests are beginning today. The ice sweeps are supposed to begin today, and there's already a City Hall Park protest scheduled for tonight, 6 p.m. And there's one down at ICE HQ, DHS HQ downtown that's beginning within minutes. So. I think it's going to be an ongoing thing. I mean, it's impossible to know how it'll play out, and maybe it'll be a it'll fizzle, but I don't think so.
How does the NYPD deal with this, by the way? Do they get involved?
Well, they've obviously been asked to support ICE and DHS, but I mean, this is a very high minority percentage, police department. There's a lot of people of color in the NYPD, so. And, it's not like, so I think it's going to be, they're really between a rock and a hard place. I would imagine that, it's going to depend precinct by precinct who, whether the commanding officer the chief in that precinct sends out their officers to help at all, or to help enthusiastically, or to help dutifully. I suspect mostly you're going to see dutiful assistance, where it's sort of like, hey, if someone were to violently assault a DHS person, the cops, they will come, and assist, but they're not going to be helping the roundups. I mean, there's no way. I mean, I don't see it. I mean, not in any meaningful way. The LAPD was much the same way, and that's a far more right-wing department than the NYPD.
Well, in LA, they were, like you said, massive protests. I mean, they were going after the DHS cops who were effectively. I mean, because those guys were coming.
Well, one was just shot here last week.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, preemptively, basically.
They're coming in
like an assassination
with face coverings, knocking down doors, snatching Americans in some cases.
Yeah, including veterans.
Yeah, I mean, just outrageous stuff. It's like, what do you expect? I don't even know who you are, man.
Right.
And you're acting this way, and you're dealing with a country.
Listen, if you approach me, I mean, let me put it this way: if I'm on a jury, and someone's charged with shooting an ICE officer, and they can credibly say, they didn't identify themselves, their face was covered, they didn't have a badge, they didn't have a business card, nothing, and they tried to kidnap me, and I shot them, they're walking from jury with Ted Rall on the jury, no question.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. 1,000% agreed. I mean, you can't put a mess like that. I mean, they're functioning as cops for all intents and purposes, and yet they're not cops.
Yeah, you know what they are? This is like, we see this in the developing world. We see this in other countries, right? These are paramilitaries, is what they are.
Yes.
They're not real cops. They're not real soldiers. You can write police on your little vest that you bought on eBay, which is really literally, that's not even like a uniform. They buy their own crap, like any of us can buy it. I mean, Jamal, you and I can dress up like ICE guys, go out and kidnap people tonight. I mean, seriously, who's going to stop us? And there's already been credible cases of impersonation used to rape and kidnap people. So it's just going to get worse and worse. And migrants aren't going to show up to court anymore. They shouldn't. Really, I would never go to an ICE office.
Well, I suppose we will see how New York responds. And wow, the fact that Eric Adams is running again after allowing
with his 9% approval rating.
Yeah, which is going to go less and less. The more these raids take place, the more these people that get kidnapped, the more protests that takes place in New York over this. I hope there are massive protests over this. I mean, it's
there
outrageous.
Should be.
Yeah,
there should
the stuff
be.
that they were doing in California was outrageous. I mean, this is like as you point out, a paramilitary run by the president. This kind of Gestapo-esque force that is knocking down doors.
They're goons.
Yeah. Ted, always appreciate you, man. I always
you,
do. Ted Rall, political cartoonist, syndicated columnist. You can catch him on his show, TMI, on YouTube that takes place at 10 a.m. He takes place now. Ted,
That's right.
you're awesome. Have a good one. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Please tell me when I do that.
Nah, it's cool. I'm good. All I got to do is hit a button. Okay.
Have a good one, man. Be safe.
Right.
Thank you.
Ciao.
All right. You guys, we have come to the end. I lost track of Ted. I'm sorry. I totally lost track. Let's go to chats. Let me see. Are there chats? So we have chats. Excellent. I always love it when we have chats. They help support the show. Alexander G. USA is a Monty Python Black Knight, missing all limbs, protect still provoking fights. It's like I don't know if you guys know that skit. Monty Python, they cut his limbs off. He's still trying to hop around, trying to fight. There's that. We have Cherie. Thank you, Jamal. Thank you, Cherie. Thank you, Cherie. I appreciate it. So Bikes a Lot. Wait, I'm sorry. Sir Bikes a Lot Day. Sir Bikes a Lot Day. Israel now, Israel today, Israel forever. Yes, sounds like segregation now, segregation today, segregation forever. Segregation is illegal. What is his name? What is his name? It was in Georgia or Alabama, Georgia, I believe, where they were trying to get the black girl to go to the schools. And I could see the speech. I could see him in my mind when he was giving that speech. George McGovern? No, it wasn't McGovern. It'll come to me. It'll come to me. It'll come to me. Oh, that's aggravating me now. It'll come to me. I don't care about the United States immigration. I just don't know. I just don't want the Israelis to control U.S. foreign policy. I don't think they do control U.S. foreign policy. I think the U.S. uses them as a rogue or treats them as if they're a rogue state. But all things being equal, are they really doing anything that's out of alignment with what U.S. policy? I mean, how do you pay somebody 80%, 70% and call them a rogue state? The moment that the money stops, the moment that your point of view stops, they stop. So it's not like what they're doing is against what the United States wants. At least that's my take. Sent you something on Clash of Civilizations. Playlist by Kevin Wayne. Kevin, I got your email. Yes, but I'm going to read the book. I told Sarah Bills I'm going to read the book. Damn it, I'm going to read the book, especially if she's going to watch Star Trek. What's this one? Jamal, did you touch base with Janice Krathkamp? Yes, I have. Yes, I have. And I asked her to come on to the show. She said she doesn't often do shows. I will send her another email to see if she's willing to do mine. It sounded like she was interested, and then all of a sudden the email stopped. I'm going to hit her up again today to see whether or not she's willing to come on to discuss Syria. And thank you for the connection. She did seem open to coming on. So fingers crossed. Hopefully she'll join and talk about it. All right. We have come to the end. George Wallace, thank you. Thank you. George Wallace, thank you. It was Alabama, not Georgia. Thank you. Alabama was the second thought in my mind. I couldn't figure out which one it was. Thank you for that. George Wallace. Foment Dissident. What's this one? Do you have a favorite speech or monologue by TNG or D? Yes. Yes. The one that's coming to mind is Cisco, where Pale Moonlight, Cisco gives that speech where he is trying to see, I don't even know if he's trying to justify it. I think he's trying to justify it to himself. Where after he lets Garrett kill the Romulan, blame the Dominion for the Romulan death, get the Romulans into the war because Starfleet was losing the war, and they required the Romulan Empire to get involved. And Romulans was like, I'm not getting involved. We're just going to let all of you kill each other. We'll deal with it after. When the Romulan Empire gets into the war, Cisco gives the speech to the camera where he's looking directly into the camera and talking to the computer. And he's like, I've lied, I've killed, I've made deals with, I've stolen from men in order to get other stuff. And he's effectively saying, look, this is not what a Starfleet officer is supposed to do. By the same token, is my integrity worth the lives of billions of people? He said, I think I can live with it. He gets comfortable in the seat. I think I can live with it. Computer, erase the thing. That is a hell of a speech. There's another one that Cisco did where he was talking to Commander Kira. And Kira initially made the point to him earlier in the show that Cardassians are maniacs, they're lunatics. We did what we had to do in order to survive. I was a goddamn terrorist. I know what I'm talking about. And Cisco blew it off. And when he's dealing with the Marquis, he brings in Starfleet, and Starfleet is telling him it's not that bad. You know, I know you're saying this, but it's not as bad as you're making it out to be. And when they leave, he flips out, and he's like, "The problems are not worked out here." He said, "The problem is Earth. Earth's paradise. This is not paradise. These people are fighting for survival. They're just living and dying, and Earth doesn't get it." Oh, that was a hell of a speech. That was a hell of a speech. Picard has given damn good speeches himself when he is talking about humanity, when he's making that speech to Q, and it's arrogant as all hell, where he's telling Q, you know, we don't need you. We'll figure this stuff out ourselves. We're human, goddammit. We can figure it out. And Q is like, oh, really? And he snaps his fingers and introduces humanity to the Borg. Yeah, there are some good speeches on Star Trek. Those are the three that come to mind. I don't know which one I like the most. The one for Cisco is badass because of all the shit he did in that episode. But the one Picard makes is also badass. It's defiant. It's, you know, we're man, God damn it, we'll figure it out. We're not scared of anything. We can solve any problem if we put our mind to it, and blah, 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 blah. It's like this arrogance of man talking to something that's similar to a god. No, it's fantastic. They have really good speeches for men. All right. I am going to end this. We've come to the end. We've come to the end. Let me see, do I have everybody? Yes, we've come to the end. All right. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. I want to thank all of you. Lawrence Krauss is really good. Lawrence Krauss, his book is Data Human. It's a really good book. Oh, it's a really good book. It's a really good book. All right. You guys have a fantastic day. I'll see you guys. I'll see you guys tomorrow morning, bright and early. Be kind to the degree to which you can be kind. Oh, that episode sucked. The Q's kid, oh, that sucked. The Voyager should not have had access to the Q. The first few were okay. The one where the guy was trying to kill himself, that was good. That was a fantastic episode. Again, Voyager has its moments. Q trying to have a kid by Janeway, oh, just stop. Just stop. Q's trying to have sex with Janeway. Just stop. Just stop. Just stop. Just stop. Just stop. I love Kim Iverson. I would defend her to my dying breath. She's fantastic. Her dad loved my show. That's all it takes. you have a defender forever. All right, guys. You have a good one. You be safe. Be kind to the degree that you can be kind. Have a good one.